Chapter 1815. Louis did not stay on the three-world island for long, only half a month. However, the spiritual jade reserves of the three-world island were almost 200 million. This was also the reason why he did not worry about the accounts. As long as he had any needs, the three-world island's treasury would be open to him without limit. Luan Xiao and Tang Jun did not say anything about this. The fuel reserves of the talent tree were replenished. Lu Yi even kept a batch of fire-type resources as backup. During this time, he also took the time to visit Wuxia in the Mermaid Clan's territory. Unfortunately, it had been a few years, but the piece of amber that sealed Wuxia was still the same. There were not many changes. The only thing that made Lu Yi happy was that he could sense that Wuxia's strength had greatly improved. This was not difficult to understand because Lu Yi could sense that the piece of amber that sealed Wuxia had been constantly devouring the water of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. It seemed that this piece of amber had the ability to refine water. Even if the efficiency of this refinement was not as good as the talent tree, it was still much more terrifying than the efficiency of normal cultivators. After refining the water of the 10,000 Elephant Sea, part of the energy produced would definitely be used by Wuxia, so her strength would naturally increase. Compared to Huaxi's increase in strength, the Pai Xiao in her arms seemed to have an even more terrifying increase in strength. Lu Yi was looking forward to seeing what would happen to Huaxi after she was unsealed. Half a month after returning to the 10,000 Elephant Sea, Lu Yi embarked on the journey back to the 9 states. He was already very familiar with this journey. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to the 9 states. The Xiang sisters were guarding the core area loyally. Yang Ling and Hu Dequan were nowhere to be seen. According to Xiang Yin, they had already entered the 9 states. As for what they were doing, it was not clear. After a short while, in the 9 states garrison hall, Lu Yi placed a large pile of storage rings on the table in front of him. The current guardian of the 9 states, who used to be the sect master of a sect in the Thunder State, widened his eyes in shock. "Brother Lu, what's going on?" As he spoke, he casually picked up a storage ring and probed it with his divine sense. What he saw almost blinded him. The ring was filled to the brim with spiritual jade. This. The sect leader was shocked. He picked up another storage ring and exclaimed, "Ah, this?" There was also a large amount of spiritual jade inside. "Don't make a fuss." Lu Yi interrupted him. "These are the resources we brought back from the three-world island. Get some people to count them and divide them into 3 equal portions. 1 for the 9 states and the other 2 for the Qinglidao world and the Yuhao domain." The sect leader was in disbelief. Our three-world island has developed so well? Although the 9 regions had heard about the 10,000 Elephant Sea for more than 10 years, and the first batch of cultivators who went to the 10,000 Elephant Sea had also been there for some time, the local cultivators who stayed behind had not received any practical benefits from the 10,000 Elephant Sea. This was the first time. There were only so many benefits. Lu Yi smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "It will be better in the future." He then warned, "If you want to find someone reliable. Don't be greedy. If I find out in the future, I won't let you off easily." The sect master immediately nodded. "Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him." Lu Yi left in a flash and soon arrived at the core area. He waved his hand and said, "You may leave. There is no need to keep watch here." The Xiangyin sisters accepted the order and headed straight to the 9 prefectures. Lu Yi stood in front of the core area and muttered to himself for a while. In the end, he entered the inner world in a flash. Lu Yi sat cross-legged in the source space. In front of him was the source space, which was like a small sun. During the final moments of the battle in the Black Abyss, the source space had rushed into Lu Ye's spirit sea under Elder Fang's control. Lu Yi had spent 3 years to barely refine it. Within the source space, Elder Fang's consciousness and the blood ancestors' precious blood's consciousness had been completely refined. It could be said that the source space was now very pure. There was no longer any trace of divine power remaining. If that was all there was to it, Lu Yi did not need to do anything else. However, the blood ancestors' precious blood had corroded the core area of Fangtsuan Mountain for so many years. It had not only corroded the source space. The source space was the most important part of the precious blood's corrosion. As long as the source space was corroded, the precious blood's consciousness would be able to control the inner world. However, in the entire inner world, apart from the corrosion of the source space, there were still remnants of the precious blood's power in the entire domain. Not to mention other things, there would still be blood rain falling in the inner world from time to time. However, it was not as frequent as before. Lu Yi had personally investigated the spirit jade mine in the inner world. It was also contaminated by the power of the precious blood. If the remnant power of the inner world was not completely cleared out, no one would know what changes would occur once the three parts of Fangsuan Mountain completely merged with the core area. Would there be a situation where the power of the precious blood would infect the humanoid cultivators? If that really happened, then all the humanoid cultivators would become first-generation blood tribe members. This would undoubtedly be a tragedy for the humanoid cultivators. It would also be difficult to accept. Therefore, what Lu Yi needed to do now was to completely purify the inner world before the three parts of Fangsuan Mountain fused together. Under normal circumstances, he would not be able to do such a thing. Not to mention that he was just Yu Yao. Even if Ri Zhao were here, this would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. However, he had refined the core's source space. With the help of the source space's power, he could clearly see every corner of the inner world. This made the impossible possible. Simply put, with the help of the core's source space, he could extend the power of the talent tree to any part of the inner world. This way, he could completely refine the remaining power of the precious blood. This was not something that could be done in a day or two. Lu Yi was already mentally prepared for this. Moreover, he had already stored enough fuel for the talent tree, so he did not have to worry about running out of fuel. Immersing himself in his thoughts and relying on the core's source space, Lu Yi radiated the talent tree's power in all directions, slowly devouring the remaining power of the precious blood. Time passed, and the passage of time was unknown. Suddenly, one day, Lu Yi suddenly sensed a violent tremor coming from the inner world. This made him frown involuntarily. Before entering the source space, he had already sealed off his inner world. He was afraid that someone would break in. It was not that they would disturb him, but that anyone who came in could be contaminated by the remnant divine nature of the blood ancestors' precious blood. He had already informed the cultivators of the 9 states through the Guardian Hall. There should not be anyone who would not take his words to heart. As for the Xiangyin sisters, they would not go against him. In his confusion, Lu Yi released his divine perception and probed outside. He wanted to see who exactly was triggering the seal of the inner world. Soon, a look of surprise appeared on his face. This was because the Xiangyin sisters, Yang Ling and Hu Dequan, were beside the inner world. There were also 2 more familiar figures. At this moment, the Xiangyin sisters were trembling because they could feel a powerful divine perception enveloping them. Moreover, this divine perception was filled with hostility, making them feel as if they could die here at any time. The source of the divine perception was a green-robed cultivator. His powerful aura revealed his identity as Ri Zhao. Beside him, a dignified woman stood quietly, talking to Yang Ling and Hu Dequan in a gentle voice. The Xiangyin sisters quickly realized who these 2 Ri Zhao were. They were actually Ri Zhao cultivators of the hominid clan. Suddenly, ripples appeared above the inner world, and Lu Ye's figure appeared. The Xiangyin sisters immediately looked at him for help. Lu Yi immediately knew what was going on. The hominid clan and the blood clan had a feud. Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing had come here to investigate the inner world. The Xiangyin sisters did not understand the situation and came to stop them. In the end, their identities as first-generation blood clan members were exposed and they were suppressed by Chen Xianhai. Senior brother Chen, senior sister Su. Lu Yi stepped forward and greeted them. Su Yuqing, who was talking to Yang Ling and Hu Dequan, turned to look at him and smiled. Yang Ling and Hu Dequan were stunned because this Ri Zhao had been serious all this time. Hearing Lu Yi address the 2 Ri Zhao cultivators, the 2 couldn't help but think of the scene when they first met Lu Yi. This is really a martial uncle. Clearly, they called each other brothers before, but in the future, their seniority will be lower. Chen Xianhai also looked at Lu Yi, nodded slightly, and praised, "Well done." Along the way, both he and Su Yuqing had been a little nervous. Because before they saw the inner world with their own eyes, no one could be sure if things were as they had guessed. Until they arrived here and saw the inner world that was placed here. Even if they had never seen the inner world before, the throbbing in the depths of their hearts could not be faked. The rockery in front of them was undoubtedly the core that the hominid clan had lost for countless years. Thinking about it, Lu Yi was really the benefactor of the hominid clan, especially in the East. Back then, they had won the Black Abyss martial arts exhibition tournament with his help. Now, it was him who had found the most important thing. A mere praise was not enough to express the gratitude of the hominid clan. Fortunately, junior sister Su had the foresight to become his Dao companion. In this way, Lu Yi could be considered half a member of the hominid clan, and it was natural for him to contribute to the hominid clan. Senior brother is too kind. Lu Yi modestly said, looking at the Xiangyin sisters, who had a difficult expression, and said, "Senior brother, let them go first, they are my people." Su Yuqing, who was smiling sweetly, narrowed her eyes slightly. "Your people?" Lu Yi suddenly felt a chill down his spine, and hurriedly explained, "They are my subordinates. When we fought for the core, they also contributed greatly." Chen Xianhai raised his eyebrows. Although he didn't know what was going on, he still released the suppression on the Xiangyin sisters. The two sisters staggered slightly, as if they had just escaped death for no reason. Su Yuqing said, "You just said you fought for the core? Fought with who?" Lu Yi sighed, "This is a long story. Let's find a place to talk slowly?" "All right." Su Yuqing nodded. She was also very curious about how Lu Yi had brought the core out of the wonder. "If the two uncle masters don't mind, you can go to Brother Hu in my place. We have found a place to stay in this world. Although it is not big, it is peaceful." Yang Ling suggested. "Let's go." Chen Xianhai put his hands behind his back and motioned for Yang Ling to lead the way. Chapter 1816. Atop a towering mountain in Dingzhou, the sea of clouds churned as far as the eye could see. It was like a fairyland. Lu Ye's voice rang out continuously, occasionally supplemented by Yang Ling and Hu Dequan. Gradually, everything that had happened in the inner world was presented in front of Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing. When they learned that the Red Talisman Association had been hiding in the middle of the inner world for so many years and hadn't submitted to an enemy several times stronger than them, including one led by Rizhao, the two Rizhao nodded slightly. The foreign cultivators they had selected back then had been carefully examined and nurtured over a long period of time. Now, it seemed that most of the cultivators they had sent out were trustworthy. When they learned that the blood ancestors' precious blood in the inner world had gained sentience, Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing couldn't help but pale. They didn't know that a drop of the blood ancestors' precious blood had been left in the inner world, and that the precious blood had gained sentience and was about to infiltrate the core's origin. However, they finally understood why Yu Yao had been unable to find anything when she went to search for it. According to Lu Ye's conjecture, the core's origin was protecting the humanoid cultivators. It didn't want them to wander into the inner world, so whenever a humanoid cultivator entered the wonder, the inner world would avoid them. The foreign cultivators they had sent out didn't receive this treatment. Some of them encountered the core and wandered inside, while others didn't and returned empty-handed. As Lu Yi slowly narrated the events of the final battle in the origin space, the two Rizhao also learned about it. When Lu Yi finished, Su Yuqing and Chen Xuanhai's expressions became strange. Chen Xianhai looked at him in surprise. In other words, at the final moment of the battle, the core's consciousness used its body as a cage to imprison the precious blood's consciousness. Then you refined it all. Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing glanced at each other, knowing what the other was thinking. Then, Chen Xianhai asked carefully, "What changes did you experience after refining the origin?" Lu Yi said, "There aren't many changes, but I can use the origin to easily control the inner world, and I can also mobilize the inner world's foundation. On the way back, I encountered an insect hive, and I used this method to suppress and kill a solar insectoid in the inner world." Although Chen Xianhai had expected this, He still didn't know whether to laugh or cry when Lu Yi said this. As for Hikaru's death, although it wasn't a small matter, it was nothing compared to the current situation. Seeing the strange expressions on Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing's faces, Lu Yi asked suspiciously, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Chen Xianhai opened his mouth as if he found it difficult to speak. In the end, he waved his hand and said, "Junior sister, you tell him." Su Yuqing nodded, looked at Lu Yi and said softly, "Lu Yi, you have traveled a lot in the starry sky. Have you ever heard of the title of Realm Master?" Lu Yi nodded. Jiang Shang was the sector lord of the limitless realm in the four-way galaxy. The Jade Conch realm also had a sector lord called Cho Wu. Su Yuqing continued, "There are actually two types of realm masters. One is a real realm master, and the other is a fake realm master." Lu Yi was puzzled. There are real and fake realm masters? What's the difference? Su Yuqing explained, the biggest difference between real and fake realm masters is that they have not refined the source energy of a realm. For those who have not refined the source energy of a realm, the so-called realm master is just an honorific title given to them by the cultivators of this realm. They may be the strongest person in their realm, or they may be the most respected person in their realm, but no matter which one it is, there are not many conveniences in their realm. A real sector lord is different. Because he has refined the origin of this realm, he can freely use this realm's foundation for his own use. Just like what you did when you suppressed Hikari from the Zerg clan. With a single thought, he can even turn this realm upside down and collapse. Such a sector lord can be said to be the real master of this realm. Speaking of this, Su Yuqing looked at Lu Yi faintly, a complicated look in her eyes. Chen Xianhai also looked at him with a similar expression and couldn't help but curse in his heart. Sending Lu Yi to the illusionary blood magic eye wonder was to let him search for information about the core. The hominin tribe didn't even have much hope. After all, generations of hominins had worked hard for so many years, but to no avail. If Lu Yi could find even a little bit of information about the core, it would be a huge gain. In the end, no one expected that in just a few short years, Lu Yi, who was only at the mid-stage Moon Jade Conch realm, would be able to bring the core back from the illusionary blood magic eye wonder. Not only that, he had refined the core's source energy and become its master. The core's return was a good thing, but it wasn't a good thing that the core now had a master, especially if the master wasn't from the hominin tribe. One could imagine that after the three Fangsuan mountains merged, Lu Yi, as the master of the core, would naturally become the master of the entire Fangsuan mountains. This was something the blood ancestor had always coveted but had never been able to do. "I told you to find the core, not to refine it." Lu Yi blinked and seemed to realize something. He immediately turned to Chen Xianhai and said sternly, "Senior brother, don't worry. Although I'm a human, since I've become Yuqing's Dao companion, my heart will definitely be with the hominin tribe. In the future, I won't do anything to betray the hominin tribe. This little brother's heart is clear to heaven and earth, and the sun and moon can bear witness to it." As he spoke, he reached out and grabbed Su Yuqing's jade-like hand. Su Yuqing immediately blushed and struggled with all her might, but she couldn't break free. Yang Ling and Hu Dequan were shocked. One of them hurriedly looked up at the sky, while the other looked down at his feet. The Xiang sisters also looked away in time. Chen Xianhai felt a headache coming on. When they first met, Lu Yi had called Su Yuqing senior sister. Now that he realized the pros and cons, he called her Yuqing. This person was too realistic. Chen Xianhai took a few deep breaths and calmed his somewhat chaotic aura. After a moment of silence, he said, "This is a serious matter. We have to inform the others immediately." He also knew that Lu Yi hadn't intentionally refined the core's origin. According to Lu Yi, it was the origin's consciousness that had guided him. Otherwise, how could Lu Yi, a mid-stage moon jade, have refined the core? When Mount Fangsuan was still intact, the hominin tribe had tried to refine the core's origin, but none of them had succeeded. Mount Fangsuan? That was a starry sky treasure. How could it be refined by someone so casually? Lu Ye's refinement was a huge coincidence. The corrosion of the blood ancestor's precious blood, the weakening of the origin's consciousness, and the choice of life and death had led to a mid-stage moon jade becoming the core's master. Throughout history, such a thing had never happened before. Regardless, this was a serious matter. They had to inform the other two tribes Rizhao as soon as possible. At this moment, everyone was definitely waiting for news. The red-faced Su Yuqing nodded slightly and turned to Lu Yi. "Let's go to the core." Lu Yi felt his palm being pinched. He immediately nodded. "Then let's go." The group then hurriedly flew toward the core. Along the way, Su Yuqing transmitted her voice over. "Don't worry. You've already refined the core's origin, so you're the core's master. When Mount Fangsuan fuses with the core, you'll also be the master of Mount Fangsuan. The hominin tribe won't do anything to harm you. It's just that the implications of this matter are too great, so they'll need some time to accept it." Lu Yi nodded. "I'm not worried." He hadn't realized this before, but after hearing Su Yuqing's explanation, he realized just how great of an impact his refinement of the core's origin had on the hominin tribe. From another perspective, if an outsider cultivator suddenly refined the core's origin and became the master of the 9 states, then Lu Yi and the other cultivators wouldn't be able to remain calm, even if that outsider cultivator had made great contributions to the 9 states. After a short while, in a spacious area within the core world, Lu Yi stood to the side and waited quietly. Su Yuqing and Chen Xianhai were busy setting up a complicated formation. The cultivators of Mount Fangsuan could pay a certain price to travel between the various tribes. Lu Yi knew about this, as he had previously traveled from the western region to the eastern region. However, this kind of travel not only consumed resources, but also required the use of some special methods. And these methods could only be used by the hominin tribe in Mount Fangsuan. No one else could use them. The formation that was being set up in front of him was undoubtedly something like a bridge. After working for a few days, the 2 Rizhao were finally finished. Su Yuqing raised her head and looked at Lu Yi. "You can just wait outside." Lu Yi nodded. In the next moment, the divine senses of the 2 Rizhao surged. When powerful soul power fluctuations spread out, Lu Yi immediately felt immense pressure and couldn't help but retreat. The runes of the formation that had been set up shone, gradually turning into light that enveloped the figures of the 2 Rizhao. In the illusory hall, the blurry figures of Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing began to appear. After they completely solidified, they transmitted a message through a special method. Soon, illusory figures similar to them appeared in the hall. After several months, the 3 Rizhao were gathered once again. Someone hurriedly asked, "Have we arrived? What's the situation now?" Before Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing could answer, someone answered, "Since senior brother Chen and junior sister Su can project here, they are obviously already in the core world. Our junior brother Lu is really amazing. He actually brought the core world out, huh?" Hearing this, many Rizhao were in high spirits. Just as this person said, Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing could project here, so they must have already entered the core world. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do this. And counting the time, they should have already arrived at Jade Conch. For a time, the atmosphere was lively, and the various tribes were jubilant. "Senior brother Chen, tell us?" Rizhao, who was the first to speak, said. Chen Xianhai nodded and tirelessly told them the information he had learned from Lu Yi. Many Rizhao listened attentively. When they heard that Lu Yi had actually refined the core world and now became the master of origin, the group of Rizhao was instantly dumbfounded. Chapter 1817. It was like a family had lost a girl, and for various reasons, they sent an outsider to inquire about her whereabouts. In the end, the outsider did a good job. Not only did he bring back the girl, but he also cooked the rice. Most importantly, the core wasn't as simple as losing a girl. After refining the core, he would become the master of the entire Fangsuan mountain. The Rizhao couldn't accept this. No one could allow such an existence to rule over their entire race. In fact, it could even be said that the future of their entire race would be handed over to this outsider. How preposterous! How dare that brat! How dare he! Rizhao beat his chest and stomped his feet in grief. It was as if the girl in his family had really been cooked by an outsider. The illusory palace was in an uproar. The matter of the core's origin being refined was undoubtedly a huge blow to Rizhao and the others. As Rizhao, their temperament and cultivation were extremely high. Ordinary matters wouldn't cause them to be so emotional. However, today's matter concerned the future of their race, so they couldn't be blamed. Chen Xianhai watched coldly from the sidelines and couldn't help but sigh. He knew that the situation would develop in this direction. Rizhao, who had a fierce temperament, was enraged and shouted, "Kill that brat! The core will have no master." Someone immediately spoke up, "That's not right. He helped our little human race find the long-lost core. Now that the three tribes have merged, it's a great merit. It's fine if we don't express our gratitude, but how can we kill him? If so, what will become of our little human race? Besides, he's not completely unrelated to our race." Lu Yi was Su Yuqing's Dao companion. Rizhao, who had spoken earlier, also realized that he had spoken without thinking. He looked at Su Yuqing and said, "Junior sister, please don't blame me. I'm used to speaking without thinking." Su Yuqing said indifferently, "Then senior brother better change your habits. It won't be good if you cause a misunderstanding." They couldn't kill him, but if they allowed the situation to develop like this, no one would feel safe. For a moment, the Rizhao felt helpless. After a while, someone spoke up leisurely, "I'm curious about one thing. As far as I know, our junior brother Lu is only at the middle stage of the Moon Jade realm, right? Even if he had the help of the core's consciousness when refining the core's origin, it shouldn't have been so easy. How could the core's consciousness and the blood ancestors' precious blood be so easy to refine? Even for us Rizhao, who can guarantee that we'll succeed? Furthermore, how did he refine the blood ancestors' blood? The blood progenitor's precious blood has terrifying corrosive power. Even if someone is only touched by the rain of blood, they will gradually turn into a first-generation blood tribe member. How did Yu Yao refine it without being affected?" Hearing this, many Rizhao turned to look at Chen Xianhai. Chen Xianhai was taken aback. He shook his head slowly and said, "I've neglected to ask." It was mainly because he was too shocked to know that Lu Yi had refined the origin and become the master of the origin. He only wanted to quickly inform the rest of the Sunshine and did not think to ask about this. "There is more," Rizhao continued. "According to junior brother Lu, at the last moment, it was the origin's consciousness that actively sought him out and helped him refine it. In other words, no matter how we look at it, the origin's consciousness thinks highly of him. But what is so special about him that the origin's consciousness would entrust the success or failure of the battle against the precious blood to him? Although the origin's consciousness was not a living creature, in terms of knowledge and experience, it was not inferior to Rizhao's. In fact, it was even stronger. So, this matter was very strange. Why would the origin's consciousness make such a choice? What did it value about Lu Yi? Or was it simply a last resort? However, this was obviously not logical. If this was the case, there were many cultivators with cultivation levels higher than Lu Ye's that could have chosen him, such as Yang Ling and Hu Dequan. They had been in the inner world for so many years, so they undoubtedly had more advantages than Lu Yi and were more likely to be recognized by the origin. However, the origin did not choose them. Instead, it chose Lu Yi, who had not been in the inner world for long. So, the most likely explanation was that there was something special about Lu Yi that caught the origin's attention. "Can I trouble junior brother Chen and junior sister Su to lead junior brother Lu here so that we can ask him in detail?" Rizhao asked. Instead of guessing here and there, it was easier to ask him face to face. After he finished speaking, he looked at Su Yuqing. "Junior sister Su, don't worry. No matter what the result is, unless junior brother Lu has been infected by the precious blood and becomes a blood kindred, I will guarantee his life." The speaker, Rizhao, came from the south and was the oldest among all the Rizhao present. He could also be said to be the most respected. This could be seen from the way he addressed Chen Xianhai as junior brother. His guarantee was undoubtedly very strong. Chen Xianhai looked at Su Yuqing. Su Yuqing pondered for a moment and nodded. Then, "Please wait a moment. I will lead him here." As she spoke, her figure faded away. In the inner world, Lu Yi had already retreated far away, waiting silently. Suddenly, Su Yuqing's voice came to his ears. Lu Yi, come here. Hearing this, Lu Yi hurriedly flew forward. At the same time, Su Yuqing's divine sense enveloped him, relieving him of the pressure. After a short while, Lu Yi stood in front of Su Yuqing. She grabbed Lu Ye's hand and said, "Don't resist. I will lead you to a place. Ri Zhao of the blood kindred has something to ask you." "Okay." Lu Yi nodded. Su Yuqing asked worriedly, "Have you been infected by the power of the blood ancestors' precious blood?" Su Yuqing looked straight at him. "You can't lie in front of me." "I really haven't," Lu Yi repeated. "Let's put it this way. I have a special refining ability. I can refine anything in this world that is harmful to me." Su Yuqing was stunned. What kind of ability is that? Such a terrifying refining ability should not be something that Yu Yao could possess. Lu Yi thought for a moment before replying, "I don't know either." The innate skill tree was a name that he had given himself, so he did not know how to explain it to Su Yuqing. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he said, "When the core essence came into contact with me, it mentioned the Dao tree bloodline. From what it said, it seems to think that I belong to this bloodline." What? Su Yuqing's pupils contracted. "The core essence thinks that you belong to the Dao tree bloodline? I don't know. In any case, it only mentioned it casually, but it didn't ask too many questions. However, I have refined many things since I started cultivating, and I can refine anything that is harmful to me. Furthermore, under my inner vision, I can see that there is indeed a tree in my body." Su Yuqing's heart trembled. Being able to refine anything that was harmful to him, the Dao tree bloodline, she slowly nodded. "I understand. You can stand to the side for now." There was no need for Lu Yi to ask Ri Zhao face to face. Lu Yi retreated. Moments later, Su Yuqing's figure reappeared in the illusory palace. Seeing her return alone, the group of Ri Zhao were puzzled. Su Yuqing's voice sounded, "Lu Yi is the successor of the Dao tree bloodline. I just found out about this." There was a short period of silence in the hall, and soon, someone exclaimed, "The successor of the Dao tree bloodline? Junior sister, are you sure? Another successor of the Dao tree bloodline has appeared? So that's how it is." Many of the Ri Zhao were like country bumpkins who had never seen the world as they cried out in surprise. Even Chen Xianhai looked at Su Yuqing in shock, wondering if he had heard wrongly. "Quiet down, what are you doing?" The most prestigious person in the south, Ri Zhao Ri, spoke in a dignified manner as he looked at Su Yuqing. "Junior sister, is this true?" Su Yuqing said, "Lu Yi told me that when he came into contact with the core essence had mentioned the Dao tree bloodline. Furthermore, Lu Yi also said that since he started cultivating, he had refined many things, and he could refine everything that was harmful to him. Under my inner vision, there is indeed a tree in his body, and he is of the fire element." The southern Ri Zhao Ri nodded slightly. The Dao tree bloodline can refine anything in the world. If that's the case, then it makes sense. Clearly, the core essence had sensed that Lu Yi was the successor of the Dao tree bloodline when it came into contact with him, so it was at ease to help him refine the core essence. This was because even the blood of the blood progenitor could be refined by the Dao tree bloodline. If the successor of the Dao tree bloodline has refined the core essence. The southern Ri Zhao Ri pondered before turning to look at everyone. It doesn't seem that unacceptable? The reason why the Ri Zhao Ri of the Miniman race had such a huge reaction to Lu Yi becoming the Lord of Origin was mainly because Lu Ye's current cultivation was too weak. Even if his potential was not bad, no one could say for sure what he would become in the future. He was still an outsider. However, the successor of the Dao tree bloodline was undoubtedly worth looking forward to. Su Yuqing said unhurriedly, "When I first met him, he was only at the early stage of the star constellation stage. At that time, it was only a dozen years ago." The group of Ri Zhao Ri could not help but be shocked. A dozen years ago, he was at the early stage of the star constellation stage. A dozen years later, he was already at the middle stage of the moon jade stage. In the entire world, only the successor of the Dao tree bloodline could achieve such a terrifying cultivation speed. As expected, The future was promising. Amidst the silence, the southern Ri said, "It is a fact that the core has been refined. Unless we can lose our humanity and ignore the huge contribution, we can kill junior brother Lu Yi before he grows up. However, I think that none of you here will be able to do such a thing. Fortunately, junior brother Lu can be considered one of us. Since he has refined the core, he has refined it. Moreover, based on what we know now, junior brother Lu's character is trustworthy. I think we should wait and see." Seconded. Ri added. Seconded. Seconded. The three Ri expressed their opinions one after another, and the matter of the core being refined was settled. The southern Ri looked at Su Yuqing again. "Junior sister, I'll leave junior brother Lu to you to take care of. It's true that the Dao tree bloodline has great potential, but we must not let him walk on the path of evil. We need to be vigilant because of what happened 10,000 years ago in the 9 regions. I don't want our race to repeat the mistakes of the 9 regions. I understand. I will take good care of him." Su Yuqing nodded solemnly. Chapter 18:18. In the inner world, Lu Yi watched as Su Yuqing and Chen Xianhai slowly came back to their senses, and the terrifying soul force fluctuations also slowly subsided. Chen Xianhai turned to look in Lu Ye's direction with a slightly complicated expression, and said, "Junior sister, I'll leave it to you." Su Yuqing nodded. Only then did Chen Xianhai fly out of the outer world. Lu Yi glanced in the direction he left, and walked towards Su Yuqing. After standing in front of her, he asked, "What's wrong?" The way Chen Xianhai looked at him just now seemed a little strange. Su Yuqing pondered for a moment, and then stretched out her hand to Lu Yi and said softly, "Come." Lu Yi placed his hand on her palm, and in the next instant, pure magic power wrapped around him, and the two of them flew towards the nearest spiritual peak. After a while, Su Yuqing took out 2 chairs on that spiritual peak and sat opposite Lu Yi. Lu Yi felt that she should have something very important to tell him, otherwise there was no need to be so serious. However, Su Yuqing had not mentioned it yet, and he did not want to urge her, so he waited quietly. After a long while, Su Yuqing said, "How much do you know about the Dao tree lineage?" Lu Yi shook his head, "I know nothing at all." He had heard this title from Fong Lao, but at that time, Fong Lao did not say too much, and asked in return, "You know?" Previously, when he mentioned the Dao tree lineage, Su Yuqing clearly had a different reaction, clearly having heard of this lineage. "I've heard of it. In fact, there are records of the Dao tree lineage in Rest Abyss Pavilion." Su Yuqing nodded. Lu Yi was surprised. Why didn't I see it? When he first entered Heart Mountain, he had stayed in Rest Abyss Pavilion for several months, imprinting a large amount of information about the starry sky and bringing it back to the 9 provinces, filling in the gaps in the 9 provinces' knowledge of the starry sky. Su Yuqing said, "There are some secrets in Rest Abyss Pavilion that are not open to outsiders." Lu Yi understood, and was wondering why he had not seen any records of this. "Tell me about it." Lu Yi sat up straight. He was actually very interested in his inheritance, and back then he had asked Little Nine about it. Unfortunately, Little Nine could not give him any answer, only telling him that Lu Yi was not the first person to obtain this inheritance, and that before Lu Yi, several cultivators of the 9 provinces had obtained it, but they had not been able to grow. Su Yuqing's voice sounded, "What I know are all things recorded by the ancestors of my clan. I have never seen it with my own eyes, so you can just listen to it. Some things need your own judgment." Lu Yi nodded. "The Dao tree is a legacy, and a very powerful one at that. There is only one person in each generation, and its specific form should be as you described before. When you look inside, there is a tree in your body." The last time the successor of the Dao tree appeared, it was 10,000 years ago. At that time, there was an extremely famous top domain, which was also the domain of the human race. It was even better than the current Yellow Dragon domain, and could be said to be the domain of the human race. Unfortunately, it was a top-grade realm like this that was destroyed in the end because of the Dao tree lineage. Why? Lu Yi frowned. He did not have a deep understanding of how strong the Yellow Dragon domain was, but after living in the 10,000 Forms Sea for so many years, he had heard of the Yellow Dragon domain's great name many times. Now, on the 10,000 form C, the Yellow Dragon domain monopolized a top spiritual island. 10,000 years ago, the human race's domain was even stronger than the Yellow Dragon domain, but such a domain was destroyed because of the Dao tree lineage. Lu Yi was somewhat puzzled, and did not know what kind of cause and effect was involved. Su Yuqing said, the Dao tree's successor of that generation was a cultivator of that top domain. He rose from nothing and became famous in the starry sky. The speed of his growth was extremely terrifying, but he did some things that angered the heavens and angered many forces. Not only was his reputation ruined, even the domain he came from was implicated. When she spoke up to hear, she glanced faintly at Lu Yi. There's nothing in the world that the Dao tree can't refine. Your cultivation speed is so swift, and it's probably related to your own inheritance. I presume you're aware of how much assistance this inheritance provided to you during your growth. Lu Yi nodded seriously. Without the talent tree, he would never have been able to achieve what he did today. In the process of your growth, have you ever used the power of the Dao tree to refine living beings? When she asked this question, Su Yuqing's expression was extremely serious. Lu Yi decisively shook his head. Never. Are you sure? I'm sure. Lu Yi nodded. In fact, Lu Yi had discovered this long ago after the first change of the talent tree. Since he could activate the power of the talent tree to refine spirit stones, then he could completely refine the spiritual power in the bodies of cultivators for his own use, and even refine their qi and blood. If he really did so, then every cultivator would be a cultivation resource that he could refine. But Lu Yi did not do so, because he felt that doing so was no different from eating people, and it was somewhat difficult for him to accept. So until now, no matter how many enemies he had killed, even if some of them were not of the human race, he had never refined them. That's good. Su Yuqing let out a long breath, completely letting go of the worry in her heart. She was really afraid that Lu Yi had done something similar. Is there some hidden danger in doing this? Seeing the change in her expression, Lu Yi vaguely guessed. Su Yuqing nodded. There is a hidden danger, and a very big hidden danger. The Dao tree lineage can refine all things, but there is one thing that can't be refined, or rather, it can't be completely refined. What? Lu Yi was extremely surprised. Up until now, he had never encountered anything that he could not refine. As long as it was something that could help him grow, it seemed that he could refine it. The 7 emotions and 6 desires. Su Yuqing's red lips parted slightly, or rather, the emotions of living beings with flesh and blood. 10,000 years ago, the successor of the Dao tree lineage did not have outstanding aptitude, and could even be said to be very poor, but he quickly discovered a way to quickly improve his aptitude, and that was to kill enemies and refine them. This kind of refinement seemed to not only allow his strength to grow, but also his aptitude. It was as if the Dao tree could deprive others of their aptitude to strengthen itself. Relying on this method, his strength grew stronger and stronger, and his aptitude became more and more outstanding. But the more living beings he refined, the more evil his nature became. Every enemy he killed was filled with all kinds of negative emotions before they died, and these emotions could not be completely refined by the Dao tree, so they could only accumulate in his body. Later on, in order to better improve his strength and aptitude, he secretly murdered many cultivators from powerful forces, including the successors of some of the top domains. Because these people were all extremely talented, they were of great help to his growth. He walked further and further down this evil path, causing more and more deaths. In the end, he lost himself and brought disaster to the domain he came from. After this matter was exposed, countless powerful forces joined forces to besiege that domain. Countless Sunshine Realm experts participated in the battle, and the people of that domain were plunged into misery and suffering. If the experts of that domain had not been prepared and created a mysterious treasure to move the domain away, I'm afraid that the entire domain would have been destroyed in that battle. Lu Yi originally thought that he was only listening to a story that happened 10,000 years ago. The fate of his ancestor made his heart tremble and he was secretly on guard, but when he heard this, he suddenly felt a strong sense of familiarity. An expert of a certain realm had long been prepared. He had created a mysterious treasure and moved the entire realm away at the critical moment. He hurriedly asked, "What was the name of the successor of the Tao tree 10,000 years ago? Which domain did he come from?" Su Yuqing thought for a moment and said, "That person was called Chao Nian, and the domain he came from was called the Nine States." At this point, she raised her hand and grabbed Lu Ye's hand, looking at him seriously. "Lu Yi, you must learn from Chao Nian's mistakes. With the Tao tree, you have faster growth than anyone else. You must not be greedy and refine living creatures. This will only harm you and not do you any good." Of course, Lu Yi would not do such a thing. If he wanted to, he would have done it long ago. Moreover, to him, cultivation was very simple. As long as the talent tree had enough fuel reserves, he could just drill into the Wanxiang Sea. Why would he refine living creatures? Since he did not embark on this evil path in his early years, he would not do it in the future. "I understand." Lu Yi nodded and looked at Su Yuqing. "Yuqing, I have something to tell you." "Go ahead." Su Yuqing looked at him seriously. Lu Yi gave her a thumbs up. "The domain I came from outside is the Nine States." Su Yuqing blinked her big eyes. "Isn't it the Nine Heavens?" She still remembered that Lu Yi used to call himself Lu Ye of the Nine Heavens. The Nine Heavens is just a name to outsiders. A senior once instructed us that when we go out, we must never mention the words Nine States. Therefore, the cultivators of this domain have always called themselves the Nine Heavens to outsiders. This matter was destined to be unable to be hidden from the Xiaoman tribe. Because in the future, once Mount Fangzuan merged, they would know the truth about the Nine States sooner or later. And in front of Su Yuqing, Lu Yi had even less of an intention to hide it. Su Yuqing was stunned, then immediately reacted. "Your Nine States and Chao Nian's Nine States?" Lu Yi nodded. "If nothing unexpected happens, it's the same Nine States." When he first met Little Nine used a method to let him see the scene of the previous 9 prefectures being besieged. At that time, he didn't know what the previous 9 prefectures had done to provoke so many strong enemies to besiege them. Unfortunately, Little Nine couldn't explain this matter to him because when the previous 9 prefectures was besieged, Little Nine's intelligence had not yet been born. The reason why it could let Lu Yi see that scene was mainly because that shocking battle had left a deep impression on the origin of the 9 states. Little Nine was the combination of the tool spirit of the Tianji disk and the origin of the 9 states. Naturally, it reappeared with the origin of the 9 states. Only now did he know that the origin of the calamity of the former 9 states was actually Chao Nian. It was Chao Nian who had taken the evil path and offended too many powerful forces, so everyone joined forces to attack the former 9 states. Every morning, he had to spend a long time fighting against his cough. This time, he did not know how long it would take for him to completely recover. Happy National Day. While you're at it, ask for a monthly ticket. It seems to be double. End of this chapter. Chapter 1819. The former 9 states where Chao Nian was from was a top-level domain. Unfortunately, a single shift had exhausted almost all of the domain's resources, causing the 9 states to weaken. It was only a few years ago that it was barely promoted to a large domain. Now, everything was developing in a good direction. The cultivators of the 9 states had left the starry sky and connected with the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The 9 states itself had the flower domain attached to it. The two complemented each other. Coupled with the special existence of Little Nine, the 9 states had leaped into a large domain that could rapidly grow. This was an advantage that no other domain in the starry sky could reach. It could be said that the future of the 9 states was worth looking forward to. In front of Lu Yi, Su Yuqing suddenly understood. So, 10,000 years ago, although Chao Nian died, the inheritance of the Tao tree was still left in the 9 states? That should be the case. Lu Yi nodded. This inheritance might have had other owners before Chao Nian, and after Chao Nian, it might have had several owners until Lu Yi obtained it a few years ago. I see. Su Yuqing murmured. Lu Yi looked at her. What did you think of? Su Yuqing said, actually, when I saw these records about the 9 states and Chao Nian, I was puzzled about one thing. The 9 states was the top-level domain occupied by the human race. Even if Chao Nian had done many evil things, the various factions only needed to kill Chao Nian to take revenge. Why did they gang up to attack the 9 states? Now that I think about it, Chao Nian was probably just a trigger. The inheritance of the Dao tree was their true goal. They must have known at the time that the inheritance of the Dao tree was still in the 9 states. Ordinary grievances were not enough for those factions to target the 9 states, but if there were enough benefits, it would be different. The temptation of the inheritance of the Dao tree was too great, and Chao Nian's actions gave them enough reasons and excuses. Thus, a great show of many factions joining forces to besiege the 9 states began. If the experts of the previous 9 states era had not been prepared, expending enormous energy and wealth to create the Plate of Heavenly Secrets, and using the power of the Plate of Heavenly Secrets to shift the 9 states away, the entire 9 states would have been dug up after that battle. Su Yuqing said in a serious voice, "The senior you mentioned was right. When you go out, you must not mention the 9 states. 10,000 years is a long time, but for those great factions, it is not that long. The name of the 9 states and the inheritance of the Dao tree can lead to disaster." Lu Yi nodded. "As for the little human tribe, only Ri Zhao and I know about this. The news will not be leaked, so you can rest assured." Right now, Lu Yi was the master of the core source. In the future, he was destined to become the master of Mount Fengsun. It could be said that he was already bound together with Mount Fengsun. It was a relationship where if one of them suffered, the other would suffer. If one of them rose or fell, they would rise or fall together. The sunshine of the Minimen tribe naturally wouldn't do anything that was disadvantageous to him. Lu Yi was not worried about this. But then again, after chatting with Su Yuqing today, she learned some secrets that were closely related to her. Suddenly, he thought of something. Oh right, how long would it take for the 3 Fengsuan mountains to merge together? Su Yuqing did some calculations and replied, "Our eastern region is the closest to here. It will probably take less than 3 years. The southern region will take more than 10 years. The western region is the furthest. I'm afraid it will take at least 30 to 40 years. Then I have to hurry." Lu Yi was deep in thought. There was plenty of time for the south and west to integrate, but the east only needed less than 3 years, which was very urgent. "What's wrong?" Su Yuqing was confused. Lu Yi explained, "Although I've already refined the core source and also refined the blood ancestors' precious blood's consciousness, that drop of precious blood's corrosion of the core world is omnipresent. Now, there are still remnants of the precious blood's power in the entire core world. I have to carefully sort it out and completely purify the remaining power of the precious blood. Only then will the Minimen tribe have nothing to worry about after Mount Fengsuan is integrated." Is 3 years enough time? Su Yuqing's expression tensed up. She clearly also realized that if the remaining power of the precious blood was not completely sorted out, it would lead to terrible consequences. It's about time. It doesn't matter if it's not enough. When the time comes, I'll seal the core, and the eastern region won't be able to integrate. He had already sealed the core before, so it wouldn't be difficult for him to do it again. Then I'll have to trouble you. Su Yuqing nodded. Lu Yi looked at her beautiful face and blinked. It's indeed very difficult. If there's a reward, I'll be even more motivated. Su Yuqing smiled and stood up. I'll wait until you're done sorting out the core. After saying this, she rushed out of the core world. Lu Ye's voice came from behind her. You said it. After watching Su Yuqing leave, Lu Yi finally calmed himself down. After a short while, his figure flickered and he entered the core space. As far as the eye could see, the core source was like a great sun. However, it was different from when he first saw it. At this moment, the core source was no longer shrouded in blood-red light. Instead, it was pure and flawless. The core source was unharmed, but the entire core world had yet to be sorted out. Lu Yi directly jumped onto the core source and sat down cross-legged. With his identity as the master of the core source, he investigated the entire core world. He extended the power of the talent tree and slowly refined the remaining power of the precious blood. He didn't need to worry about the 9 provinces. Not to mention that there were now 4 late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivators overseeing the 9 provinces, There were even 2 in the Sunshine Realm. Lu Yi believed that while he was sorting out the core world, Su Yuqing and Qin Xianhai would take good care of the 9 provinces. Day after day, year after year. Sorting out the core world was extremely boring, but Lu Yi didn't dare to be careless. Otherwise, if there was even a little bit of the precious blood's power remaining, it could cause unpredictable consequences. As he continued to refine the remnant power of the treasure blood, Lu Yi could feel his own holiness growing. At this moment, he really wanted to know how much power Blazing Heaven would have been able to display if he hadn't died and stood in front of him. If he had used his holiness to suppress him, how much power would he have been able to display? Before refining the blood ancestor's precious blood, his own divine nature was already incomparable to that of the blood race. Now that he had refined a drop of the blood ancestor's precious blood, his divine nature had grown even more. This kind of suppression was fatal to the blood race. Su Yuqing and Qin Xianhai would occasionally come to the core world to investigate the situation, but they didn't disturb him. Only once did Lu Yi take the initiative to contact Su Yuqing. He learned that they were now in the 9 provinces and were living leisurely and comfortably. For the 2 of them, all they had to do now was wait. It wouldn't be long before the core world led the eastern core world over. In the future, when the southern core world and the western core world returned, the hominid race would be unified. Both Rizhao and Qin Xianhai were looking forward to this. Mount Fangsuan had been divided for a long time. In their generation, they finally had the opportunity to restore the glory of their ancestors. Everyone felt honored. Nearly 3 years passed by in a leisurely manner. On this day, Lu Yi carefully examined the core world several times. After confirming that there was no more power left in the core world, he let out a long sigh of relief. Including the 3 years he had spent refining the precious blood, he had spent a total of 6 years in the core world. During this time, he hadn't cultivated, so his strength hadn't increased at all. But in his opinion, it was all worth it. First of all, although his strength hadn't increased, his divine nature had undergone earth-shaking changes. In the future, when he faced the blood race again, even if it was Rizhao, he would be able to deal with them calmly. Moreover, he had become the core world's master. In the future, he would be the realm master of Mount Fangsuan. In this way, the hominid race would become the strongest backing of the 9 provinces. When he traveled outside, he wouldn't have to worry about any problems in the 9 provinces. After 6 years of hard work, he had reaped all these benefits. He had profited greatly. As for his own strength, he could make up for it with a trip to the 10,000 Elephant Sea after the matters here were settled. Moreover, after so many years of consolidation, Yu Yao's mid-stage cultivation base was stable enough. Delighted, Lu Yi came out of seclusion. His figure flickered, and he exited the core world. "Lord!" A familiar voice immediately rang out. Lu Yi turned around and found that it was Xiang Yin and her sister, who had been guarding here all this time. Lu Yi nodded slightly and turned to look in a certain direction. He could vaguely feel that there was something very close to him rapidly approaching. It seemed to be a part of him that was missing. He immediately understood that Mount Fangsuan in the east was coming. That feeling of missing something was the core world's master's intuition. It wasn't that he was missing something. Where are senior brother Qin Xianhai and senior sister Su Yuqing? Lu Yi asked. Xiang Yin immediately replied. The 2 of them left a few days ago to welcome Mount Fangsuan in the east. Madame said that there would be some turbulence in this fusion, so they had to return to the east to oversee it. Madame also asked me to pass on a message to Lord. Please oversee the core world and maintain stability. Lu Yi nodded. I understand. After carefully sensing for a while, he confirmed that Mount Fangsuan in the east would fuse in less than a few days. Lu Yi decided to wait in the core world. He instructed, you 2 can leave. You're not needed here anymore. Yes. Xiang Yin and her sister accepted the order and left, heading straight in the direction of the 9 states. Lu Yi raised his head and glanced at the blood-smelting realm in the distance, suppressing the sudden throbbing in his heart. No matter what, the fusion of Mount Fangsuan was a top priority. He had to resolve this matter first. Once again, he flashed into the inner world and waited quietly. A few days later, Lu Yi, who was overseeing the core world, suddenly opened his eyes. Even though he couldn't see anything, he could clearly sense that Mount Fengsuan in the east was coming. Almost at the instant this thought appeared in his mind, heaven and earth changed. A loud buzzing sound rang out from all directions. The space of the core world became distorted, and the entire world seemed to become much more complete all of a sudden. The territory was also rapidly expanding. It wasn't expanding. Instead, it was like the missing pieces of a puzzle had been pieced together. And this piecing together caused the core world and even the east to tremble and become restless. Lu Yi raised his hand. With a thought, he mobilized his origin power. It was like a large invisible hand brushing past the turbulent area. In an instant, the turbulent area became peaceful. The turbulence caused by the fusion of Mount Fengsuan in the east and the core world lasted for half a month. After half a month, when the dust had settled, Lu Yi could clearly sense that the core world had expanded many times. There were also many more familiar sceneries that originally belonged to Mount Fengsuan in the east. End of chapter. Chapter 1820. The integration of Fengsuan Mountain in the east went extremely smoothly. Other than some disturbances within the realm, there were no substantial losses. The news spread from the east to the south and west. Many of the minims were extremely excited. In a few decades at most, Fengsuan Mountain, which had been divided for countless years, would be united once again. The entire minims were filled with anticipation. Within Fengsuan Mountain, Lu Yi calmly sensed his surroundings. After the east was integrated, he could clearly sense that his control over this realm had not weakened. Instead, the foundation of the realm that he could mobilize had become even stronger. Back then, he had used the foundation of his inner world to suppress sunshine of the insect race, greatly reducing his strength. In the end, he had killed him. If he had controlled Fengsuan Mountain back then, the suppression of sunshine of the insect race would have been even more intense. After the east was integrated, the minims from top to bottom started to get busy. After all, the entire inner world had expanded and many things would change. These changes would require the minims to slowly adapt to. However, it was clear that the cultivation environment of Fengsuan Mountain was much better than the east. This was undoubtedly more beneficial for the growth of the minims. Moreover, there was originally a spirit jade mine in the inner world. In the entire universe, this was a capital that only the top realms possessed. Lu Yi sensed that after the east was integrated, the spirit jade mine showed signs of growth. Although the growth was slow, it was indeed growing. This made Lu Yi imagine what would happen to the spirit jade mine after the south and west were integrated and Fengsuan Mountain was complete. It would take some time to settle down in the east. Lu Yi did not get involved. With the three sons overseeing the east, there would not be any trouble. With a leap, he left Fengsuan Mountain. Looking up, to the left of Fengsuan Mountain, in the distant void, was the 9 prefectures. To the right was the blood-refining realm. The 3 realms were distributed in a triangular manner and gathered in this part of the universe. Lu Ye's gaze turned towards the blood-refining realm. He channeled his spiritual power and flew over. For hours later, they arrived at the blood refinement realm. Back when Yu Yao was in the true lake realm, she had only felt that the blood refinement realm was incomparably huge. Now that she was here again, she realized that the realm that she had once felt to be huge was nothing more than that. The entire blood-refining world was now peaceful. Countless humans lived in it. Because the 9 regions had swallowed a large amount of the blood-refining realm's foundation, the blood-refining realm's level was undoubtedly very low in terms of the realm level. The entire realm's spirit chi was not very rich, and it could barely breed some low-level cultivators. Lu Yi reckoned that if he didn't interfere, the humans born from the blood refinement realm would only be able to advance to the Cloud River tier at most, even if they embarked on the path of cultivation. After that, there would be no room for improvement. But now, all the major sects in 9 regions had set up a Taoist field in the blood refining world, where the cultivators of their own sect taught the cultivation of the human race in the blood refining world. If there were outstanding talents, they would be brought to 9 regions. The blood refining realm had long become a place for the 9 regions to select talents. Not to mention the other sects, just the Jade Blood sect had recruited many good seedlings from the blood refining realm since the blood refining realm was conquered. Louis hadn't been to the blood refining realm for many years. Strictly speaking, he hadn't been here since the end of the war with the blood refining realm. Back then, his cultivation wasn't high and his knowledge was shallow. He couldn't see anything special about it. But today, Louis had a different feeling. The blood refining realm was actually not very suitable for the human race to live in. After all, this realm was formed from the remains of the blood ancestor's body after his death. The various things in this realm were more suitable for the blood race. The human race could survive here, but the average lifespan wasn't long. This was undoubtedly the influence of the environment, and this influence was everywhere. The human race couldn't avoid it. Previously, when Lu Yi was sorting out the inner world, Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing had nothing to do, so they had traveled around the blood refining realm for a while. With their knowledge and experience, they had undoubtedly discovered this problem. A few days ago, Chen Xianhai had suggested to Lu Yi that he should find an opportunity to move all the humans in the blood refining realm to 9 regions. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any problems in the short term. But in the long run, the lifespan of the humans living in the blood refining realm would become shorter and shorter. Sooner or later, there would be a risk of extinction. This wasn't difficult. The Pillar of Tianji had the ability to teleport. 9 regions only needed to gather a group of cultivators to assist in the migration of the humans in the blood refining realm. Settling the humans in the blood refining realm wasn't a troublesome matter. The territory of 9 regions was enough to settle these humans. They hadn't done this before, mainly because no one had realized the problem with the blood refining realm. Moreover, 9 regions didn't have a deep foundation at that time, so large-scale teleportation would consume the foundation of 9 regions. Lu Yi already had a plan in mind. When he returned, he could go to the 9 regions Guardian Palace and talk to the current Guardian. The Guardian Palace would come forward and work together with the strength of 9 regions to formulate a plan for the migration of the humans in the blood refining realm. When the time came, he just had to execute the plan according to the plan. Lu Yi didn't come here because of this matter. Instead, as early as 3 years ago, when he returned with the inner world, he felt a strange connection between himself and the blood refining realm. It was just that Lu Yi had no time to think about this because he had to sort out the inner world before. This feeling became more obvious after he finished sorting out the inner world a few days ago. Lu Yi had traveled between 9 regions and the 10,000 Elephants Sea many times, and every time he would pass by the blood refining realm. He had never felt this before, but the last time he came back with the core, he felt it. This was obviously not right. It seemed unlikely that the changes in the blood refining realm would cause this feeling to appear, because the blood refining realm hadn't changed much. Therefore, the problem lay with him. He had refined a drop of the blood ancestor's precious blood. During the process of sorting out the inner world, he had completely refined the remaining power of the precious blood, so the feeling had become more direct. It was obvious that the blood refining realm was formed by the blood ancestor's remnant body. He had refined a drop of the blood ancestor's precious blood, and it was the power of this drop of blood that allowed him to sense the blood refining realm. Lu Yi wanted to know the source of this feeling and what changes it would cause, so he needed to come and investigate in person. In fact, there was one thing he was a little puzzled about. According to the available information, after the blood ancestor died, his remnant body turned into several parts. 1 part of his body, 1 part of his head, 1 part of his limbs, and 1 part of his body. After a long period of evolution, each part had turned into a paradise for the blood race to live in, becoming a realm of its own. In the current starry sky, although the blood race controlled many realms, only these few realms could be considered the foundation of the blood race. Even though these worlds hadn't reached the level of a top-level world, they were all top large-scale worlds. Especially the blood origin world formed from the head. It was said that it was already showing signs of evolving into a top-level world. If the other realms formed by the remnant body were so amazing, why was the blood refining realm formed by the body so weak? Lu Yi did not know what had happened to the blood refining realm, but he felt lucky. If the blood refining realm had been strong enough, there would not have been an expedition back then. Today, the 9 states would have been enslaved by the blood-refining realm, and the human race would have become food for the blood race. Collecting his thoughts, Lu Ye's figure drifted, and he felt at ease. He saw many blood ponds, which were all over the blood-refining world. They were originally the most beloved training grounds of the Blood Clan. If a Blood Clan member entered the blood ponds, they would have a chance to obtain the Saint Blood. If they could refine the Saint Blood, they could become Saint Sovereigns. Even if they could not find the Saint Blood, if they were lucky enough to survive, their strength would increase greatly. Of course, the risk was great. Basically, entering the blood pools was a situation of 9 deaths. However, compared to the many blood race members in the galaxy, the blood-refining realm was undoubtedly blessed. This was because they had a very direct way to obtain the sacred blood. On the other hand, the stronger blood race members in the galaxy would not have an easy time obtaining the sacred blood. Gazing at these blood pools, Lu Yi felt that if he entered them, he might have a chance to find the remaining sacred blood. However, this was not very attractive to Lu Yi. His own sacred nature was already very terrifying. Refining the sacred blood would not increase his strength by much. He continued to drift. Soon he sensed something. As he moved through the blood-refining realm, the vague feeling also changed. Sometimes it was strong, sometimes it was weak. Lu Yi followed the changes in this feeling and explored until he finally arrived at a place. Jade Pillar Peak. There were a few famous places in the blood-refining realm from north to south. Towering Sky Peak and Jade Pillar Peak were 2 of them. These 2 spiritual peaks were the highest in the blood-refining realm. They were located at the Blood Ancestor's chest. Below them was the Cloud Vine Plain. Below them was the Divine Gate Sea, which Feng Wujiang had led the 9 states' human race to occupy. Jade Pillar Peak was a mess. Back then, the final battle between the cultivators of the 9 states and the upper echelons of the blood race in the blood refinement realm had taken place on the Jade Pillar Peak. In that battle, the Divine Sea of the 9 states had sent out many people who had participated in the expedition. Many blood race Saint Venerables from the blood refinement realm had used some unknown method to fuse their saintly nature and create an extremely powerful blood-colored giant. Unfortunately, it was still killed by the cultivators of the 9 states. Even after so many years, the traces of the battle had not completely disappeared. At the center of Jade Pillar Peak, there was a huge pool of blood. Lu Yi flashed to the side of the pool and stared down. He could feel that the source of the feeling was deep below. It was not that he had never entered a pool of blood before. Back then, he had dared to enter as a true Lake Realm cultivator, let alone now. Therefore, he did not hesitate and dove in. Magic power enveloped his body. The sticky blood around him could not obstruct him at all. Lu Yi dove down. In this dark environment where there was no light, there was not much pressure. Instead, he felt like a fish in water. Lu Yi vaguely felt that this had something to do with his powerful holiness. Otherwise, other blood breeds would not have been so relaxed. Lu Yi indeed found sacred blood here. He casually refined it. It was better than nothing. After an unknown period of time, his body suddenly became light. The thick blood water that enveloped him disappeared at this moment, and he fell into a huge chamber. End of chapter. Chapter 1821. Lu Yi clicked his tongue in wonder. He had once ventured deep into a place like the blood pool to search for the missing Lan Chiyue, but he hadn't encountered anything like today. Thus, he had never imagined that there would be a space below the blood pool that wasn't filled with blood. Truth be told, he hadn't explored the blood-refining realm enough. After the great victory of the blood-refining expedition, he hadn't explored the blood-refining realm in depth. Back then, his strength was limited and he couldn't act rashly. Later, his strength slowly grew, but he came and went in a hurry every time. How could he have the time to explore the blood-refining realm? If he had the time, he might as well cultivate and increase his strength. If he hadn't sensed something after refining the blood progenitor's precious blood, he wouldn't have come here. As he urged his magic power, fireballs shot out in all directions. Soon, the large space was illuminated with light. Lu Yi looked around and fixed his gaze on a spot to the side. Imprinted in his vision was an incomparably large oval-shaped object. It was grayish-brown in color and looked like a solid rock. But strangely, the surface of the huge rock was covered in strange patterns, like dried blood vessels. The most eye-catching thing was that at the center of the rock was a huge crack. Inside the crack, there was something faintly discernible. This thing was the source of Lu Ye's reaction. There was almost no need for Lu Yi to investigate. At this moment he finally knew what the source was. Precious blood. The blood progenitor's precious blood. In the depths of the blood-refining realm's Jade Pillar Peak, there was actually a drop of the blood progenitor's precious blood. This caused his expression to turn solemn. His right hand slowly pressed against the mountain pan saber as he secretly urged his magic power. The drop of precious blood he had encountered in the inner world had left a deep impression on Lu Yi. That thing had developed an ignorant spiritual intelligence over the long years and had almost corroded the core. Zhou Ran and the other first-generation members of the blood race were completely powerless in front of it and could be easily crushed. If it weren't for Old Fang's protection, Lu Yi would have been doomed in that battle. Once bitten, twice shy. Lu Yi didn't know what the situation was with this drop of precious blood and whether it had developed its own sentience. If it did, it would be troublesome. However, after thinking about it, this didn't seem very likely. If this drop of precious blood had truly developed intelligence, it would have been impossible for it to not react at all. Lu Yi gradually relaxed. Lu Yi carefully sensed the treasure blood and confirmed that there was nothing wrong with it. Only then did he move forward, quickly arriving in front of the huge gray rock. Looking from afar, the rock was huge, but looking closer, it seemed even bigger. Lu Yi looked at it carefully and suddenly understood what this rock was. This was undoubtedly the blood ancestor's heart. He had come down from the blood pool on top of Jade Pillar Peak. In terms of position, this was indeed the chamber where the heart was located. However, the blood ancestor had been dead for an unknown number of years, and there was no sign of life left in the heart. That was why it looked like a rock. Staring at the huge hole in the heart, Lu Yi became more and more curious. What kind of powerful existence could actually cut down the blood ancestor? This hole was undoubtedly a wound. The precious blood was hidden deep within the wound. Lu Yi stared at the drop of precious blood. The more he looked at it, the more he felt that something was wrong. This drop of precious blood gave him an abnormal feeling. The divine power contained within it was very thin. However, there was no doubt that this was precious blood. Why was it like this? Looking more carefully, Lu Yi gradually became aware of something. He immediately activated the insight spirit pattern to enhance his eyes. In the next moment, he saw an aura that was almost imperceptible to the naked eye escaping from the precious blood. It slowly floated up and merged with the blood pool above. So it was like this. Lu Yi understood what was wrong with the precious blood and how the blood refinement realm's sacred blood came about. Based on his current observation, the sacred blood was undoubtedly a product of diluted precious blood. This drop of precious blood had existed here for an unknown number of years, and its sacred nature was constantly dissipating. After merging with the blood pool above, drops of sacred blood were born. This was why Lu Yi felt that there was something wrong with the drop of precious blood in front of him. This drop of precious blood was empty and did not have the sacred nature that a normal drop of precious blood should have. There was no doubt that there was no problem with this deduction. After all, when he condensed precious blood, he was constantly tempering his own vitality. It could be said that precious blood was the essence of his vitality. Thinking about it this way, any drop of the blood ancestor's blood could be called sacred blood. After the sacred blood was condensed, it would be the blood ancestor's precious blood. Since sacred blood could be condensed into precious blood, after the precious blood dissipated, it would naturally become sacred blood. In comparison, Lu Yi was undoubtedly inferior to the blood ancestor in terms of life force. This was because his precious blood was only equivalent to a drop of the blood ancestor's ordinary blood. So, if Lu Yi had discovered this place a few hundred or 1,000 years later, perhaps even this drop of precious blood would not have remained. Understanding this point, Lu Yi stretched out his hand to grab that drop of saint blood. Although it only had a superficial appearance, compared to ordinary saint blood, this thing's enhancement of saint nature could not be ignored, so Lu Yi naturally did not plan to let it go. However, at this moment, on the surface of the stone heart that had died a long time ago, lines of patterns suddenly lit up, turning into a barrier that enveloped the entire heart. Lu Ye's hand did not manage to grab it. Under the sudden change, he instinctively retreated. Defensive spirit patterns quickly formed in front of him, and at the same time he pulled out the mountain blade at his waist. At the same time, Lu Yi felt that the space around him was turbulent, and it took a while for it to slowly calm down. The chamber was quiet, and Lu Ye's face flickered under the illumination of the fireballs hanging in the air. He stared at the barrier for a while before slowly putting away his blade. The barrier slowly disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Lu Yi stepped forward and carefully tried to extract the drop of precious blood, but in the end, he touched the barrier again. When the barrier appeared, the same thing happened again. The space around him trembled and then slowly calmed down. Lu Yi was greatly surprised, because someone had actually left a seal here. He did not know who had left it, but it was most likely the powerhouse who had killed the blood ancestor. The other party's methods were simply too shocking. Who knew how many years had passed, but the sealing power still existed. From the looks of it, although the other party was very strong, there was not much they could do about the blood ancestor's precious blood, so they had left it here and let it slowly dissipate on its own. The vein-like patterns on the heart he had seen before were actually a part of the seal. This kind of seal was actually not very meaningful to Lu Yi, because he only needed to stimulate the power of his talent tree to slowly devour and refine the power of the seal, then break it. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi did not immediately do so. Instead, he flew up. A moment later, he returned to Jade Pillar Peak. Looking around, he found that his surroundings were a mess. Obviously, this was caused by the 2 times he had touched the barrier. The turbulence was not only in the chamber he was in, but also in Jade Pillar Peak. Spreading out his powerful divine sense, Lu Yi quickly discovered that the turbulence had spread to the entire blood-refining realm. Some buildings had collapsed, and in the villages, many humans rushed out in panic, most likely thinking that it was an earthquake. The migration of the blood-refining realm's humans was about to begin. Originally, Lu Yi did not think that this matter was urgent, but now it had become the first thing to do because he had to take out the drop of precious blood in the blood ancestor's heart and refine it. This process would definitely cause the entire blood-refining realm to be in turmoil, and it was very likely that it would cause casualties. After all, most of the humans in the blood-refining realm had never cultivated. As for leaving the drop of precious blood alone, it was impossible. Even though it was now only in appearance, Lu Yi was really worried that it might suddenly develop spiritual wisdom. This was related to the blood ancestor, so he could not be careless. Therefore, this drop of precious blood must be refined as soon as possible, not to improve his own divine sense, but to prevent future troubles. Thinking of this, Lu Yi immediately set off in the direction of the 9 continents. More than an hour later, Lu Ye's figure appeared in the Tian Continent's Guardian Hall. After a few years, the Guardian here had changed. After exchanging instructions with the Guardian, news quickly spread out in all directions. 3 days later, in the Guardian Hall, many cultivators of the 9 continents gathered together. Some of them were constellation cultivators, while most of them were spirit sea cultivators. However, regardless of whether they were constellation cultivators or spirit sea cultivators, each of them represented a sect. These sects, without exception, all had their own Taoist temples in the blood-refining realm. There were many people here, nearly 1,000 of them. No one knew what had happened, but since Lu Yi had summoned them, no sect in the 9 continents dared to ignore it. In the square outside the Guardian Hall, many cultivators were whispering to each other, trying to find out the reason for this large-scale gathering, but no one said anything. It was not until Lu Yi appeared and told the truth that many cultivators were in an uproar. After so many years, the cultivators of the 9 continents had long been accustomed to the blood-refining realm. There were a large number of humans living in the blood-refining realm. These sects could freely select suitable talents from the areas where their Taoist temples were located and bring them back to train. Now, they were suddenly asked to migrate all the humans in their Taoist temples to the 9 continents. This was undoubtedly a bit sudden. After all, for the migration of a large number of humans, the first thing to do was to plan the resettlement problem, which was not an easy task for any sect. Fortunately, Lu Yi, as the guide of the 9 continents, had brought too many benefits to the 9 continents over the years and had accumulated enough prestige. With a simple explanation, many sects expressed their full cooperation. Moreover, Xiao Jiao was secretly helping in this matter. With the help of the transmission of the Pillar of Tianji, such a large-scale migration was not difficult. The major sects of the 9 continents only needed to make arrangements. As for whether the humans of the blood-refining realm were willing to come to the 9 continents, there was no need to ask. In the past, only humans with good enough qualifications could be brought to the 9 continents. Now, anyone could do it. Where could such a good thing be found? Chapter 1822. All the major sects of the 9 provinces were mobilized to make preparations in advance and inform the human race of the blood-refining realm that a great migration had begun. There was no resistance throughout the entire process, and it lasted for 3 months before it ended. After migrating from the blood-refining realm to the 9 provinces, the human race who originally lived in the blood-refining realm had arrived in a more favorable environment. Perhaps they would feel unfamiliar for a short period of time, but this was not a big problem. After 1 or 2 generations, their descendants would become the natives of the 9 provinces and would inevitably be completely integrated with the 9 provinces. Lu Yi checked the entire blood-refining realm and confirmed that there were no longer any creatures remaining. Only then did he return to the Jade Pillar Peak and go deep into the underground chamber. With his previous probing, Lu Yi knew that once he made a move, he would definitely trigger the invisible seal. Previously, he had been worried about the human race in the blood-refining realm, but now that he no longer had any misgivings, he immediately went all out. When the seal was triggered, the feeling of turbulence came again and soon spread throughout the blood-refining realm. Lu Yi did not care and directly urged the power of the talent tree. Invisible roots wrapped around the barrier in front of him and began to refine it. According to his guess, this seal was left behind by the almighty powerhouse who killed the blood ancestor in order to seal the drop of blood ancestor's blood. From this, it could be seen that even the unknown powerhouse had no good way to deal with the blood ancestor's blood. They could only use this method to slowly dissipate the power of the blood. It did not take Lu Yi too long to refine the barrier. After all, this thing had existed for countless years and its power had long been reduced. In just 10 days, the barrier had completely disappeared. During the entire process, the blood-refining realm could be said to be constantly shaking. Almost all the buildings left behind by the human race had collapsed. One could imagine that if the human race in the blood-refining realm had not migrated to the 9 provinces in advance, there would have been countless innocent casualties. During the refining process, Lu Yi also observed the seal. Because there were traces of spirit patterns on it, he had gained quite a bit. 10 days later, when the barrier had completely disappeared, Lu Yi flashed into the broken heart and grabbed the drop of blood ancestor's blood. He continued to urge the power of the talent tree and madly refined it without caring about the consumption. Although he had guessed before, when he really began to refine it, Lu Yi found that this drop of blood ancestor's blood was indeed very incomplete compared to the one he had refined in the inner world. Strictly speaking, this second drop of blood ancestor's blood was very incomplete. In comparison, this second drop of blood ancestor's blood was not even 10% of the previous one. After all, the blood ancestor's blood had been refined. As time passed, the power of the treasure blood gradually disappeared. Lu Yi gradually developed an extremely strange feeling. This feeling was very strange. His thoughts were scattered, and his perception of his body gradually became blurry. What replaced it was an extremely strange feeling. It was as if he had suddenly put on a heavy armor. There was a strange feeling, but also a kind of oppressive pressure. He's blood's blood of ancestors' blood ancestors' blood ancestor. He's bloods, will's blood's realms. S's of blood realm. Of these blood of them's blood realm, he wanted to turn his head and look around, but he couldn't even feel his head. All he could feel now was an extremely heavy body. Lu Yi was shocked and suddenly opened his eyes. That wonderful feeling disappeared without a trace at this moment. He looked down and found that his limbs were still intact. He touched his neck and found that his head was still there. The second drop of blood ancestor's blood had been completely refined, but Lu Yi was still sitting in the hole in the blood ancestor's heart, a thoughtful look on his face. He vaguely knew what had happened before, but this kind of thing was really strange. Even with his experience, it was hard to imagine. Thinking back to what he'd felt before, Lu Yi closed his eyes again. Soon he entered that strange feeling again. It seemed that this kind of thing wasn't too difficult for him. This was undoubtedly related to the blood ancestor's blood ancestor. His body was incomparably heavy, and he couldn't feel his limbs or head. It was as if he had put on an extremely heavy armor, making it difficult for him to breathe. But in reality, his limbs were still intact. The reason he felt this way was purely because his mind had already radiated out to the entire blood refining realm. The heavy armor covering his body was the entire blood refinement realm itself, which was why Lu Yi felt as if his limbs and head had all disappeared. This was because the blood ancestor's body had been cut off. The current blood refining realm was like an incomparably large armor. Lu Yi even had a feeling that he could control the blood ancestor's body and use it as a real armor. As for what kind of power he could display while controlling it, he didn't know. But in the end, this was the blood ancestor's body, so in terms of quality, it was undoubtedly very high. Lu Yi understood that this was a change brought about by refining the treasure blood. The treasure blood was the treasure blood of the blood ancestor, and the blood refinement realm was the remnant body of the blood ancestor. There was an extremely close connection between the two. After refining the treasure blood, he naturally had a certain degree of control over the remnant body of the blood ancestor. Immersing his mind, Lu Yi attempted to control the blood refining realm. In an instant, the entire realm began to shake. A far more terrifying commotion than when he had broken through the first layer of the seal erupted from every corner of the blood refining realm. Giant spirit peaks collapsed, mountains collapsed, and torrents swept out in all directions. In the vast divine watchtower sea, the dark red water boiled, and even though there was no wind, the waves reached hundreds of meters high. It was a scene of doomsday. If the humans of the blood refining realm still had a chance to survive when he had broken through the seal, then after this attempt, it was impossible for any living being to continue living in the blood refining realm. If someone were to stand in the starry sky and observe the blood refining realm, they would discover that the entire realm was constantly shaking. Half a day later, this terrifying change slowly subsided. Near the hole in his heart, Lu Yi frowned. He found that with his current strength, controlling the blood refining realm was somewhat difficult. He couldn't support this extremely heavy armor. This was completely different from his control of the core world. In terms of size, the core world was not inferior to the blood refining world in the slightest. In fact, it was even larger. However, because he had refined the core origin, it was extremely easy for him to control the core world. This was because during the process of controlling the core world, he only needed to use a small part of his strength. The blood refining realm was different. Even though he had refined the blood ancestor's blood, he couldn't do the same thing. Strictly speaking, he wasn't the master of the blood refining realm. He only had the possibility of controlling it. Lu Yi didn't continue to try. He felt that if he wanted to control the blood refining realm with his own strength, he would have to at least advance to the sunshine realm. Moreover, even if he could control it, it didn't seem to be of much use. He could wear the Dragon Emperor's armor to fight the enemy, but he couldn't wear the blood refining realm. This thing had no head, no hands, and no feet, so it wouldn't be able to do much damage. Therefore, there was no need to try anymore. However, before giving up, Lu Yi suddenly had an idea. He couldn't control the blood refining realm by himself. What if he supplemented it with his blood clones? He didn't know what would happen if he placed his blood clones in various parts of the blood refining realm and used them together. However, he couldn't try this for the time being. Ever since he returned to the 9 regions with the inner world, he had been busy. He had only condensed 2 drops of blood during the migration of the human race in the blood refining realm. Now that he had nothing important to do, he decided to spend some time condensing his own blood. Moreover, he had a feeling that after refining the blood ancestor's blood, the amount of blood he could store had increased by a lot. For the time being, he wasn't in a hurry to go to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Now that the situation at Fengsuan Mountain had just stabilized, Lu Yi planned to stay in the 9 regions for a while and set off for the 10,000 Elephant Sea after everything had stabilized. After thinking about it, Lu Yi flew out of the blood refining realm and went straight to Fengsuan Mountain. Su Yuqing hadn't fulfilled her promise yet. Now that the inner world had been cleaned up by him and the eastern part had been integrated, she couldn't go back on her word. The 9 regions had changed a lot recently. Now, the living creatures in the 9 regions were no longer just the human race. There were often cultivators from the flower race, the wood spirit race, and the spore race walking around the 9 regions. The human race had also gradually interacted with the cultivators of the 9 regions. After all, everyone would live next to each other in the future. With the relationship of Lu Yi, there was a natural closeness to each other. The cultivators of the 9 regions had benefited greatly from this. Whether it was the flower race's alchemy skills or the human race's talisman skills, both had caused a frenzy of popularity in the 9 regions. Although it was impossible for the human race of the 9 regions to surpass the flower race in alchemy because of their bloodline, and it was even more impossible for them to refine talismans that were comparable to those made by the human race, the improvement of the cultivators was obvious. Lu Yi had brought back a lot of resources from the 10,000 Elephant Sea before, so the cultivators didn't have to worry about their cultivation. After the 9 regions had the flower realm to rely on, their foundation had improved greatly. Everything was thriving and developing in a good direction. On this day, in Su Yuqing's bedchamber on the Immortal Spirit Peak, Lu Yi was condensing his own precious blood when Su Yuqing's voice suddenly sounded in his ears. "Lu Yi, your blood servant is looking for you outside the realm." Obviously, Su Yuqing, whose whereabouts were unknown, had sensed it and specially sent a voice transmission to inform him. Lu Yi opened his eyes and stopped condensing his precious blood. His figure flickered and he left the bedchamber. If there was nothing important, the Xiang sisters wouldn't disturb him casually. Since they came to Fengsuan Mountain, something big must have happened. After a short while, outside Fengsuan Mountain, Lu Yi saw the Xiang sisters waiting there. "Lord, the Guardian Palace sent a message. They want to invite you to take a look at the insect path. It is said that there are some changes in the insect path." End of chapter. Chapter 1823. Lu Yi did not expect this to be related to the insect path. He was shocked and asked, "What happened?" Xiang Yin shook her head. "I'm not sure about the details. The news came from Yu Yao, who was guarding the insect path. It was passed on to Jiuzhou. When Lu Yi went to the Yuluo domain, he mentioned the insect path to Chou Wu. Only the Yuluo domain had the ability to send Yu Yao cultivators to guard the entrance of the insect path. He was the only Yu Yao in Jiuzhou. It was impossible for her to guard the insect path. The situation in the Qingli Dao world was similar. Wu Zhuo had to guard the domain. The insect path was very important. Therefore, after Lu Yi left, Chou Wu sent a Yu Yao cultivator to guard the entrance of the insect path all year round. However, the insect path had not changed until a few days ago. Yu Yao immediately spread the news. It was passed on to Jiuzhou through the cultivators who were active in the galaxy. The Jiuzhou guardian could not find Lu Yi, so he could only ask Xiang Yin and Xiang Yin to pass on the message. The insect path was very important to the entire Yuluo domain. Although Lu Yi could use the Soul clan's ancestral land as a transit point to travel between the Wanxiang Sea and the local galaxy, it would take him 2 months to travel back and forth. However, if the insect path stabilized, the situation would be different. Then, the Yuluo domain would have an insect path directly connected to the Wanxiang galaxy. It would be very convenient for cultivators to travel back and forth. This was very important to the future development of the Yuluo domain. Now, any galaxy that had an insect path directly connected to the Wanxiang galaxy had benefited greatly from this. Calculating the time, It had been quite a few years since the insect path had taken shape. Back when he was being chased by Tang Jun, he had inadvertently caused a void collapse. As a result, the two of them had been trapped inside the chaotic insect path. If it weren't for the fact that Lu Yi had a void beast core, the two of them wouldn't have been able to escape and would have been doomed to die inside. In the chaotic insect path, he and Tang Jun came to an agreement and temporarily joined forces. Tang Jun activated the void beast core's power, which allowed them to escape and enter the Wanxiang galaxy. After so many years, it was not strange for the insect path to have some changes. However, it was still exciting. This was because not every insect path could be stabilized. In space, there were too many insect paths that were in a state of chaos. However, if living beings ventured in recklessly, they would definitely die. There were also some insect paths that would suddenly disappear after a period of time. Therefore, Lu Yi had never dared to have high hopes for the stability of the insect path in this galaxy. Now that there was a change, no matter what kind of change it wasn't a bad thing. If it really showed signs of stability, then in time, the Jade Conch would have a direct passage to the Wanxiang galaxy. However, no one was clear about the exact situation, so they could only personally investigate. Lu Yi immediately set off. Xiang Yin and her sister had nothing to do, so they followed closely behind. The insect path was not too far away from the Wuxia continent. Lu Yi arrived at the insect path in just a few days. Looking from afar, the huge insect path stretched across the starry sky like the open mouths of beasts. There was a chaotic aura of nothingness coming from it. There was a figure standing on a giant floating continent near the path. There wasn't just one path, but many. Most of them were from the 3 realms who had heard the news and came to watch the show. Some of them were from the 9 states. Lu Yi flew to the floating continent and walked towards a middle-aged man in a green robe. "Fellow Taoist Su." The man cupped his fists. "Fellow Taoist Lu." Su Yiming from the Jade Conch continent. Lu Yi had met him before. They had fought side by side against the Filth tribe, but they weren't familiar with each other. In the entire Jade Conch continent, he was most familiar with Wan Xiao, followed by He Baichuan, who had gone to the Wanxiang Sea. After all, they often interacted with each other. Su Yiming looked at Xiang Yin and her sister behind Lu Yi. Curiosity flashed in his eyes. Are these 2 fellow Taoists from the humanoid tribe? News of the Fangzuan Mountains landing near the 9 states had already spread. The cultivators from the Jade Conch continent were extremely envious. After all, the Fangzuan Mountain had a sunshine powerhouse. It was an unattainable dream of the entire Jade Conch continent. Of course, the Jade Conch continent was also part of the galaxy and had a good relationship with the 9 states. Since the Fangzuan Mountain was the 9 states' backer, it was also the Jade Conch continent's backer. On the Jade Conch continent's side, the realm Lord Cho Wu was already preparing to bring people to the Fangzuan Mountain to meet the sunshine powerhouses of the humanoid tribe. He didn't ask for much, just to get familiar with them. He hadn't been able to make the trip because he didn't know what gifts to bring. Xiang Yin and her sister's cultivation was at the late stage of the Yueyao realm. Moreover, they were unfamiliar faces. Su Yiming naturally misunderstood. However, when he asked, he was a little puzzled. This was because Xiang Yin and her sister's physical characteristics were similar to the legendary Snow tribe. Xiang Yin pursed her lips and smiled. "We're not from the humanoid tribe. We're the High Lord's servants." Su Yiming was stunned. Obviously, the title of servant had a great impact on him. For a moment, he didn't know how to react. He was envious. "What's the situation on the path?" Lu Yi asked. Based on his current observation, the path in front of him didn't seem much different from what he remembered. Su Yiming came back to his senses and explained, "The path showed signs of stabilizing a while ago, but it didn't last long. It only lasted for an incense stick's worth of time, so I didn't dare to rashly investigate it. After an incense stick's worth of time, the path returned to its original state." "Only once?" Lu Yi asked. "Only once." Su Yiming nodded. Lu Yi pondered for a moment. "Let's wait and see." One change indeed couldn't reveal anything, but it was still a good start. he decided to wait here for a while. In any case, he had been condensing his own precious blood recently, so it didn't matter where he was. If he could wait until the path changed again, he might be able to see something. Of course, he couldn't stay here forever. He set a deadline of 2 months. Whether or not there were any changes within 2 months, he would leave. The Void Continent was very big. He found a place to sit down while the Xiang-Yin sisters stood guard beside him. During this time, cultivators from the 3 realms constantly rushed over to investigate from afar. Even Wuxia came over. While chatting with him, Lu Yi thought of Wuxia's previous request and said, "Fellow Taoist, there are some things in the Wanxiang Sea that we can't do without Old Tang." Many of the relationships in the 3 realms island were opened up by him. If he leaves, some things will be difficult to handle. The last time he met Wuxia asked Lu Yi to pass a message to Old Tang, telling him to hurry back to the Qingli Dao world and cultivate in the Wanxiang Sea. However, Lu Yi didn't mention this to Old Tang at all. The main reason was that he explained this to Wuxia. Old Tang's strength was indeed not that great. Once a battle broke out, he wouldn't be able to contribute much. However, for the development of the 3 realms island, he could shine. At this stage, the 3 realms island really couldn't let him leave. Wuxia waved his hand. "As long as there are enough resources, it doesn't matter where I cultivate. I haven't thanked you for the things you sent over a few years ago." The last time Lu Yi brought back a large amount of resources from the Wanxiang Sea, he divided them into 3 portions. The 3 realms each took 1 portion. This was the first time the 3 realms island had returned to the local star system. Both the Qingli Dao world and the Jade Conch domain were shocked and delighted. No one expected the development of the 3 realms island to be so good. The spiritual jades from the Wanxiang Sea were so easy to earn. With abundant cultivation resources, Wuxia was naturally not in such a hurry to go to the Wanxiang Sea. "You deserve it." Lu Yi didn't have to wait for too long. In less than a month, there were changes in the worm path. As far as the eye could see, the chaotic feeling at the entrance of the worm path was obviously much weaker. Lu Yi had passed through many different types of insect tunnels, so he could roughly judge whether an insect tunnel was stable or not just by looking at it. Looking at the current situation, the changes in the Jade Conch domain were undoubtedly in a good direction. Perhaps it would completely stabilize in a few years. Of course, nothing was absolute. The worm path was not something that could be interfered with by humans. Perhaps one of the changes would cause the worm path to completely collapse and disappear. The changes in the worm path did not last long. Soon, it returned to its chaotic state. Lu Yi had a plan in mind. He knew that even if the worm path was really stable, it would not take shape in a short period of time. It would take some time. This was definitely good news for the local star system. He told Su Yiming his judgment, and the latter also showed a happy expression. "I'll have to trouble you to take care of things here." The worm path could not be stabilized for the time being. Naturally, Lu Yi would not stay here for long. Now that the condensation of the treasure blood was almost done, and everything in the 9 states and Fengsuan Mountain was stable, he was ready to return to the Wanxiang Sea. "It's a small matter." Su Yiming waved his hand. "As I said before, Senior Brother Cho Wu of our world is going to visit the senior brothers and sisters of Fengsuan Mountain. Just go. I'll go back and greet them. There's no need to bring any gifts." "Thank you, Senior Brother." After a short while, Lu Yi left with the Xiang sisters. A few days later he returned to the 9 states. After checking on the living conditions of the blood-smelting world's human race in the 9 prefectures and ascertaining that everything was normal, Lu Yi hurried to Mount Fengsuan. Before he left, he had to inform Su Yuqing and inform Mount Fengsuan that the Jade Conch world was preparing to pay a visit. As soon as he entered Fengsuan Mountain, Chen Xuanhai's voice sounded in his ears. "Junior Brother Lu, come to Cloud Sea Peak." Lu Yi paused, identified the direction, and flew toward Cloud Sea Peak. Soon, Lu Yi walked into a hall under the guidance of a Cloud Sea Peak cultivator. What surprised him was that not only was Chen Xianhai here, but Su Yuqing and Wu Qima were also here. The 3 riksats were gathered together. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. What happened? Usually, even if the 3 riksats of the eastern region had something to discuss, They could communicate with each other through divine sense. Something that could make the three of them sit together was obviously not a small matter. Lu Ye's first reaction should not be that there were some changes in the headquarters of Fangsuan Mountain, right? However, as the master of the origin, if there were any changes in the headquarters, he would definitely be able to detect it immediately. In fact, he did not notice anything unusual. End of chapter. Chapter 1824. In the main hall of the Cloud Sea Peak, there were 3 great suns in the east. This made Lu Yi feel that something must have happened here. Chen Xianhai said, "Sit down and talk." Lu Yi walked straight to Su Yuqing's side and sat down. The latter lowered her head and poured him a cup of tea. Lu Yi picked it up and took a sip. "Junior brother, how effective will your holy nature be when exposed to the blood tribe sunlight?" Chen Xianhai asked. Lu Yi was a little confused by this sudden question, but he wasn't surprised that Chen Xianhai knew about this. This was because he had mentioned this to Su Yuqing when they were chatting earlier. Since Chen Xianhai knew about this, it was obvious that Su Yuqing had revealed it to him. Lu Yi put down his teacup and said, "There will definitely be some suppression, but how effective will depend on how strong the other party's holy nature is." Chen Xianhai said, "In the inner world, that blazing heaven sunshine was suppressed by you. What if we use him as a benchmark?" Lu Yi waved his hand. Using blazing heaven as a benchmark is unreliable. That guy wanted to die back then. Even without the suppression of my holy nature, he wouldn't have been able to survive. Only after his death can the blood progenitor's precious blood descend. Moreover, I hadn't refined the blood progenitor's precious blood back then, so my holy nature wasn't as strong as it is now. He paused for a moment before continuing, but the blood tribe naturally suffers from bloodline suppression. In my current state, I am confident that I can kill blazing heaven in a one-on-one battle. Chen Xianhai raised his brows. Then blazing heaven is in the early stages of sunshine? That's right. Lu Yi nodded. Senior brother, are we going to attack the blood tribe? Chen Xianhai had suddenly summoned him here and asked about the suppression of his holy nature, so Lu Yi naturally had some guesses. Su Yuqing said, "It's not that we're going to attack the blood tribe. It's just that the blood tribe in the south is attacking us." Lu Yi frowned. "What's going on?" Su Yuqing explained in detail, and Lu Yi finally understood what was going on. Several years ago, he had placed the core of Minuscule Mountain near the 9 states. When the seal on the core was lifted, the 3 parts of Minuscule Mountain were drawn toward the core. The eastern part was the closest and had already merged. The southern and western parts were further away and would take different amounts of time. Now, the southern Minuscule Mountain had barged into a place called the Bloody Extinction Galaxy. And this galaxy was one of the foundations of the blood race, the galaxy where the Bloody Extinction world was located. Even though the South had long since made preparations to conceal traces of Mount Innerheart as much as possible, the latter's trajectory in the cosmos was ultimately different from that of ordinary asteroids and floating continents. Hence, the vampires were still able to discover some clues. At first, the vampires who discovered Mount Fangsuan in the south didn't realize that it was Mount Fangsuan. They only felt that this mountain-like meteorite was somewhat peculiar and wanted to investigate it. With this investigation, he quickly discovered the problem. Now, all of the blood tribe members in the Bloodbath Galaxy were on the move. They wanted to stop the southern Minuscule Mountain and keep it in the Bloodbath Galaxy. The blood race had an instinctive desire for Fangsuan Mountain, and this desire originated from the blood ancestor. After all, the blood ancestor had tried to encroach on Fangsuan Mountain but failed in the end. In the past, the blood race had no way to seize Fangsuan Mountain. Now that the southern Minuscule Mountain had barged into the blood race's galaxy, this was a heaven-sent opportunity. How could the blood race miss it? The southern Minuscule Mountain wasn't weak as a whole. They had 4 Rizhao, 1 more than the eastern Minuscule Mountain. However, the Minuscule Mountain had more Rizhao than the eastern Minuscule Mountain, and even more Yuyao. How could the Minuscule Mountain gain any advantage in this battle? Left with no choice, the southern Minuscule Mountain could only seek help from the eastern and western Minuscule Mountain. The three divisions of Mount Innerheart were originally one family. Although they had been separated along with the division of Mount Innerheart, now that their core had returned, it wouldn't take long for them to reunite again. Faced with the southern minuscule mountain's request for help, the eastern and western minuscule mountain naturally wouldn't hesitate. Su Yuqing immediately thought of Lu Yi after learning of this matter. That was why Chen Xianhai had summoned him to ask about this matter. After learning the reason, Lu Yi immediately said, "Senior brother, I'll go too." He still had a great advantage against the blood race. Even if he encountered Ri Zhao, who was stronger than Blazing Heaven, he might not be able to pose much of a threat under the suppression of his powerful sainthood. Chen Xianhai nodded. It's good that junior brother has such intentions. Get ready, we'll set off in half a day. The southern minuscule mountains battle had already begun. If they didn't have to wait for Lu Yi, they would have already gone to reinforce him. Lu Yi immediately left Mount Innerheart after leaving Cloud Sea Peak and made some arrangements. In truth, there wasn't much to arrange. He only summoned the Xiang sisters. The Xiang sisters were both late-stage Yuyao cultivators, and they had refined 1.5 drops of his precious blood. In terms of sainthood alone, they were definitely stronger than most blood race members. They should be able to play a significant role in this battle. Afterward, Lu Yi made a trip to the 9 States Guard Palace and gave a few instructions to the current 9 States Guard Commissioner before returning to Mount Innerheart. The eastern minuscule mountain soldiers had gathered on Misty Peak. Chen Xianhai and Su Yuqing were the leaders, and there were more than 50 Yuyao. It wasn't that the eastern minuscule mountain only had so many Yuyao. It was just that teleporting to Mount Innerheart would consume a lot of resources, so the minuscule mountain sent to reinforce the southern minuscule mountain was more important than quantity. As for constellations, there wasn't even a single one. Lu Yi didn't know what the western minuscule mountain's arrangements were like, but he guessed that it was more or less the same. Wu Qima was in charge of the array formation, and he would also stay behind to guard the eastern minuscule mountain. After the battle ended, he would be responsible for bringing everyone back. Previously, Lu Yi had used the western minuscule mountain's array formation to come directly to the eastern minuscule mountain. However, from what he saw, the array formation this time was undoubtedly much larger than the last time. There were also more cultivators in charge of the array formation. Everything was ready. With Su Yuqing in the lead, half of the minuscule mountain cultivators in the eastern minuscule mountain stepped onto the array formation. At Wu Qima's command, the array formation was activated. Lu Yi stood beside Su Yuqing. In an instant, light surged and filled his eyes. Then the world began to spin. The original silence suddenly turned into a clamor. Intense magic power fluctuations filled the heavens and the earth, and the sounds of killing filled his ears. Lu Yi shook his head and immediately understood that he had already arrived at Mount Innerheart in the southern minuscule mountain. When he raised his head to look, all he could see was the color of blood. Seas of blood of different sizes stretched across the sky like clouds of blood. Many spells and talismans flickered incessantly, and the aura of life was withering from time to time. The situation in the southern minuscule mountain didn't seem too good. Lu Yi wasn't surprised by this. The southern minuscule mountain had a strong foundation, but the minuscule mountain was definitely not weak. In addition, the blood tribe had a strong desire for Mount Innerheart, so they had naturally attacked with all their might. If the southern minuscule mountain could handle it, they wouldn't have asked for reinforcements from the eastern and western minuscule mountain. While Lu Yi was still observing the battle, Su Yuqing's voice rang out. Don't stay here. Don't be in a daze. Find an opportunity to participate in the battle. As soon as she finished speaking, the many Yuyao who had come with her scattered and entered the battlefield. The one maintaining the array formation in the southern minuscule mountain was an elderly man with white hair. Su Yuqing turned to look at him. Senior Martial Brother Yu, I'll help you maintain the array formation. Half of the people in the eastern minuscule mountain still hadn't arrived, so the array formation here naturally couldn't be damaged. Moreover, the blood tribe had clearly sensed that the array formation here was meant to receive reinforcements, so their attacks were especially fierce. As soon as Su Yuqing finished speaking, she took out a purple talisman. The purple talisman turned into a barrier, enveloping a large area within it. The attacks of the blood tribe landed on the barrier, but they only caused layers of ripples. Although the quality of a purple talisman was inferior to a red talisman, it still depended on who was activating it. When activated by someone like Su Yuqing, the power of a purple talisman was incomparable to that of an ordinary cultivator. Moreover, this purple talisman was refined by Su Yuqing herself. After activating it, its power was comparable to that of a full-powered attack. With Su Yuqing's help, the critical situation here was immediately alleviated. Lu Yi stood beside Su Yuqing and looked around. Spreading out his divine sense, he quickly gained an understanding of the overall situation. The minuscule mountain tribe didn't have the upper hand, but they weren't at a great disadvantage either. Moreover, the western minuscule mountain tribe should have already arrived. This was because there were as many as 5 minuscule mountain tribe battles in the entire battlefield. In other words, there were 10 minuscule mountain tribe cultivators fighting each other. There were only 4 minuscule mountain tribe cultivators in the south. Among them, Senior Brother Yu was presiding over the array formation here to receive reinforcements, so there were only 3 minuscule mountain tribe cultivators who could participate in the battle. The 2 extra minuscule mountain tribe cultivators were undoubtedly from the west. This made Lu Yi secretly surprised. Although he had inferred from the information he had gathered that the overall strength of the Bloody Despair Galaxy was very strong, it was still quite unexpected for a galaxy to have 5 minuscule mountain tribe cultivators. Moreover, he didn't know if this was the full strength of the Bloody Despair Galaxy. Just as he was thinking this, the thick clouds broke open, and another minuscule mountain tribe cultivator's aura suddenly descended. Su Yuqing, who was standing beside Lu Yi, couldn't help but have a gloomy expression. If Lu Yi could observe the situation, she could naturally see it as well. The minuscule mountain tribe cultivators were fighting in pairs, each with their own restrictions. As long as Chen Xianhai could rush over, she and Senior Brother Yu would be able to free themselves. With Chen Xianhai, the minuscule mountain tribe cultivators would have an absolute advantage in terms of minuscule mountain tribe cultivators. But at this critical juncture, another minuscule mountain tribe cultivator came. If such a powerhouse wasn't restrained, the impact on the battlefield would undoubtedly be great. Who knew how many minuscule mountain tribe cultivators would suffer under his hands? She immediately moved to intercept him, but to her great surprise, after the arrival of this minuscule mountain tribe cultivator, a second minuscule mountain tribe cultivator appeared from another direction. Including the previous 5, there were 7 minuscule mountain tribe cultivators from the Bloody Despair Galaxy cultivators' side. Junior sister, Senior Brother Yu shouted in a low voice. He also realized the seriousness of the situation. One each. The only way to resolve the crisis was for him and Su Yuqing to take action and restrain the 2 newly arrived minuscule mountain tribe cultivators. But this way, there would be no one to maintain the array here. Chen Xianhai and the rest of the minuscule mountain tribe cultivators in the east wouldn't be able to come to support them. But now that things had come to this, he couldn't afford to hesitate too much. Su Yuqing immediately nodded and rushed towards the first minuscule mountain tribe cultivator to arrive. Senior Brother Yu rushed in another direction. Suddenly, 2 more minuscule mountain tribe cultivators appeared in the entire region. The battle was fierce. End of chapter. Chapter 1825. Senior Marshal Brother Yu was in charge of the formation in the south, and a dozen or so Yu Yao were assisting him. Now that Senior Marshal Brother Yu had left to deal with the enemy, the remaining dozen or so Yu Yao were barely able to maintain the formation. How could they possibly receive reinforcements? Hence, Zhu Yueyao didn't force the issue. She leaped into action and entered the battlefield, preparing to repel the enemy. In an instant, only Lu Yi and the Xiang sisters were left. Overwhelming attacks came from all directions. Although the humanoid tribe had temporarily given up on the formation, the blood tribe's attacks did not stop. Bloody light filled the air, completely engulfing Lu Yi and the other 2. However, just as the attacking blood tribe members thought that the formation had been broken and that Lu Yi and the other 2 were dead for sure, the dense bloody light suddenly dissipated. The scene that entered their eyes caused them to widen their eyes in disbelief. A semicircular light barrier enveloped Lu Yi and the other two. The light barrier didn't seem thick, but it blocked all the attacks and remained unscathed. None of the Blood Tribe members saw how this light barrier had appeared. It seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Not to mention the Blood Clan cultivators, even Xiang Yin and Xiang Yin, who were standing beside Lu Yi, hadn't noticed it. Earlier, when they were about to use their defensive techniques to defend themselves, this light barrier had mysteriously appeared, and its defensive power was unimaginably strong. "Defend!" Lu Yi commanded calmly. He ignored the many Blood Tribe cultivators who were glaring at him with hostility and looked toward the formation that had already stopped operating. With a thought, the formation buzzed and veined patterns flickered. To put it bluntly, the humanoid tribe's formation borrowed the power of the formation to temporarily open up a bug passage for the various tribes. This wasn't the same as a normal bug passage. Because it was temporarily opened, the bug passage would disappear once the formation stopped operating. Moreover, ordinary methods couldn't open up a bug passage. It was precisely because of the uniqueness of Mount Minuscule that this method became reality. A small part of the power that maintained the bug passage came from the cultivators in charge of the formation. The majority of it came from Mount Minuscule itself. In other words, the humanoid tribe cultivators had the ability to borrow the power of Mount Minuscule through the formation and open up a temporary bug passage. This was also why Mount Minuscule required cultivators in charge of the transportation between the tribes. Yu Yao didn't have this ability. The others couldn't, but Lu Yi could. When he arrived in the south, Lu Yi tried to sense the power of Mount Minuscule to see if he could mobilize it. In the end, he found that he could. And just like the inner world in the east, there was no resistance at all. When all was said and done, Mount Fengsuan in the south was still a part of Mount Fengsuan. Lu Yi had refined Mount Fengsuan's quintessence, which meant that he could mobilize any part of Mount Fengsuan's power. The barrier protecting him and Xiang Yin was the manifestation of Mount Fengsuan in the south. It could also be said that it was the power of this world, which was why the barrier had appeared without any warning. How could those Blood Tribe cultivators, whose cultivation base was only at Yu Yao's level, break through such a barrier? At this moment, under Lu Ye's control, the array that had stopped operating began to hum again. Moreover, compared to when senior brother Yu was in charge of it, it was operating even faster and seemed to be more stable. One figure after another appeared above the formation. Their leader was none other than Qin Xianhai. Over 20 Yu cultivators stood beside Qin Xianhai with clear eyes. They didn't feel as dizzy as they did before. Instead, they were surprised. They didn't know why the teleportation had become so easy. They didn't have time to investigate before they were attracted by the intense fighting going on around them. Qin Xianhai scanned his surroundings and roughly understood the situation. "Kill!" he yelled. He took the lead and rushed toward the nearest Mount Minuscule battlefield. The 20 or so Yu Yao cultivators also scattered in all directions, looking for an opportunity to attack. Lu Yi turned to look at where the Yu sisters were. There was a sea of blood there. It was impossible to see what was going on inside with the naked eye. However, with his divine sense, he could clearly see the life force withering inside the sea of blood. He could also hear the cries of Blood Tribe cultivators. They clearly couldn't understand why the two Snow Tribe cultivators had suddenly activated a holy aura that was even stronger than their own. It was suppressing their bloodline. After ascertaining that the Yu sisters were engaged in a fierce battle, Lu Yi ignored them. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the battlefield where Su Yuqing had been fighting. In the sky over there, Su Yuqing was engaged in a battle with a thick cloud of blood. Battling against the Blood Tribe was actually a very troublesome matter. Once the Blood Sea technique was activated, it would create a favorable environment for the Blood Tribe cultivators. If an enemy cultivator wanted to kill a Blood Tribe cultivator, the most effective method was to dive deep into the sea of blood and find the Blood Tribe cultivator hiding there. However, doing so would result in all kinds of inconveniences. If one wasn't powerful enough, it was very easy for them to fail miserably. Hence, if one didn't have absolute confidence, they would generally choose Su Yuqing's method. They wouldn't dive deep into the Blood Tribe's sea of blood. Instead, they would only engage the Blood Tribe cultivators outside the sea of blood. They would use their own methods to whittle down the size of the sea of blood and weaken the Blood Tribe cultivators. Su Yuqing's choice of strategy wasn't wrong. However, such a strategy obviously wouldn't be effective in such a battlefield. If it was really a one-on-one battle, there wouldn't be any problem. However, Blood Tribe cultivator Rizhao wouldn't fight her alone. At this moment, Blood Tribe cultivator Rizhao wasn't the only one in the sea of blood. There were many other Blood Tribe cultivators of all levels. These Blood Tribe cultivators, regardless of their cultivation level, had all activated the Blood Sea technique and merged it with Rizhao's Sea of Blood to strengthen its power. Su Yuqing threw one talisman after another into the Blood Sea. From time to time, corpses would fall out of the Blood Sea. They were undoubtedly Blood Clan cultivators who had been killed by the power of the talismans. However, such damage to the Blood Sea was not enough to harm its foundation. She obviously also realized this. She frowned slightly and thought of a way to break out of this situation. Right now, she could only use the powerful red talisman to forcefully break open the sea of blood. Only then would she have a chance to kill her enemies. Just as she was about to do so, she suddenly saw a ball of blood-red light flying toward her from the side. It was about to merge with the sea of blood that was opposing her. Judging from the fluctuations in the blood-red light, the cultivator's cultivation level wasn't very high. He was only at the middle stage of Moon Jade Realm. Su Yuqing almost instinctively attacked. She wanted to kill this cultivator on the spot to prevent him from strengthening the enemy's power. However, she soon realized who the cultivator in the blood-red light was because the aura coming from the blood-red light was very familiar to her. The sea of blood didn't reject the sudden arrival of the blood-red light, so the blood-red light was able to merge with it without a hitch. The corners of Su Yuqing's mouth slowly curled up. She continued to tangle with her opponent, waiting for the show to begin. At the same time, she secretly activated her magic power. A purple talisman's light flickered on her fingertip. A moment later, the sea of blood that had been incomparably thick all this time suddenly seemed to have suffered some kind of unexpected damage. In that instant, the entire sea of blood showed signs of collapsing. At the same time, a series of cries of alarm rang out from within the sea of blood. Crush! The Blood Tribe cultivators with low cultivation levels fell out of the sea of blood like dumplings being dropped into a pot. Their faces were filled with horror as they fell straight to the ground. The vast sea of blood peeled off layer by layer, as if it were about to collapse at any moment. The Blood Tribe cultivator, Ri, was also filled with shock and horror. However, he instinctively activated his power to prevent the sea of blood from collapsing. However, right at this moment, a bright light pierced through the sea of blood's cover and entered his field of vision. It was Su Yuqing who had accurately found his hiding position the moment the sea of blood shook and collapsed. Without any hesitation, she activated the purple talisman's power that she had prepared long ago and brazenly charged in. In the sea of blood, the woman's body was surrounded by purple light, as if she was wearing a purple armor. She charged forward, holding a purple spear that was condensed from the purple talisman's power. She was like a goddess of war who had broken through time and space. The thick sea of blood couldn't stop her at all. The spear had already pierced through Ri's chest. They were so close that their eyes met. Su Yuqing's face was filled with cold, murderous intent, while Ri's face was filled with horror. He clearly had a great advantage, but in the blink of an eye, life and death were decided. He didn't understand what had happened at all. He only knew that at that moment, he was suddenly shrouded in a terrifying divine aura, causing him to almost lose control of his own power. Otherwise, with his strength, he could have avoided such an attack. However, it was the suppression of the divine aura that caused him to lose control of his own power that led to this misfortune. His life was not yet extinguished. He gritted his teeth and reached out to grab Su Yuqing. Facing this attack, Su Yuqing had no intention of dodging at all. Suddenly, there was a stunning flash of sword light, and a head flew out. Ri froze on the spot, his hands still in the posture of reaching out. "Why aren't you dodging?" Lu Yi stood behind the headless corpse with his sword and looked at Su Yuqing with a frown. Even if they were both sunshine experts, they could not underestimate the counterattack of a sunshine expert. Su Yuqing's performance gave him the impression that she was a fledgling with no combat experience. She thought that she could rest easy after she succeeded. "Don't I have you?" Su Yuqing pursed her lips and smiled. Lu Yi stared at her and said, "You have to dodge next time." "Got it," Su Yuqing replied softly with a smile in the corner of her eyes. She seemed to be in a good mood. Lu Yi didn't know the woman's wonderful mood. He had already turned around to kill the Blood Clan cultivators who had lost their backbone. Su Yuqing followed closely behind. In just a moment, the sea of blood completely collapsed. All the Blood Clan cultivators, regardless of their cultivation level, were killed on the spot. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.